Chapter 407. It was August 6th. Yuzhou was hot. The blazing sun shone on every corner of Yuzhou, and the whole Yuzhou was immersed in a suffocating heat. In a closed private club inside the Forbidden City, Li Tianlan drank the special iced tea provided by the club, picked up a pen and signed his name on the last contract in front of him. The club was called Chang'an. In Yuzhou, where celebrities were everywhere, there were countless private clubs of all sizes. The Chang'an club inside the Forbidden City seemed inconspicuous. In terms of history, it was not as long as the Great Wall Club supported by the Prince Group. In terms of political atmosphere, it was not as good as the Lama Temple supported by the Southeast Group. In terms of international atmosphere, it was not as good as the beautiful land where the wealthy gathered. In terms of pleasure, it was not as good as the heavenly earth. It was not comparable to the Black Flag Club, which was full of stars and blood. But the Chang'an Club was the most luxurious club in Yuzhou and even the whole Zhongzhou state. The Chang'an Club had been established for less than 10 years, and less than 100 membership cards had been issued so far. To some extent, the membership card of the Chang'an Club was not something that could prove one's identity in the upper class. And the less than 100 members in the Chang'an Club did not value it either. What they valued were certain channels provided by the Chang'an Club. The Chang'an Club was really not big or famous, but it was very special. In Zhongzhou State, it was the only club that was at ease among the 6 groups, and it had the support of more than one heavyweight in the 6 groups. Zhou Yunhai, director of the North Group. Wu Qiyang, minister of the academics. Qi Baitsong, the former flag leader of the Special Warfare Group and the current top boss of Zhongzhou State. Secretary General Wu Shijiang of the Army Headquarters. Tang Xiaoshan, the Deputy Prime Minister of the Southeast Group. Cheng Wendao, the Vice President of Zhongzhou State of the Academics. The first membership cards issued by the Chang'an Club were all extremely prominent names. Senior officials of Zhongzhou State. Patriarchs of wealthy families, dark forces, martial arts forces, iron-blooded generals. Everything was there. The membership card of the Chang'an Club was indeed not something that could prove one's identity. But the people who could have the membership card of the Chang'an Club had already passed the stage of needing something to prove their identity. Since its establishment, the Chang'an Club had always played its role in silence. The disputes and games under the table of the 6 groups of Zhongzhou State, the negotiations and compromises, the cooperation and transactions between the wealthy families, the promotion of wealth and power, the blood caused by the darkness and martial arts. Terrifying, hidden, low-key, efficient, shocking. In the past 10 years, the Chang'an Club was like a pair of eyes, silently watching everything that happened here. As long as the transactions that happened here were slightly publicized, it would be an unimaginable fortune. Compared to wealth, it was more important to be trusted by the core figures of the 6 major corporations at the same time. A force that could be accepted by everyone at the same time would either be above everyone else, or would be considered harmless by everyone else. Being harmless also meant being neutral. Chang'an Club was the largest neutral club. In the past 10 years, it had belonged to the Han family, the largest neutral wealthy family in Zhongzhou State. The moment Li Tianlan signed his name, this place also belonged to Li Tianlan. In other words, part of it belonged to Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan got some shares here, not much, just 5%. However, this kind of shares with almost no dividends was meaningless in terms of wealth. Being able to access the club's intelligence as a shareholder was the real priceless thing. In addition to the 5% shares of the Chang'an Club, Li Tianlan also received nearly 8 billion in investment. And the detailed investment plan of the Flourishing Age Fund in the future. But he paid very little for it, or it could be said to be a lot. 20% of the future interests of the East Emperor Palace. This price could be said to be heavy or light. What he bet on was the future prospects of the East Emperor Palace and the confidence of both the investor and the invested party. If the East Emperor Palace could not develop in the future or even died young, the investment of the Flourishing Age Fund would undoubtedly be a big loss. But if Li Tianlan really broke through the obstacles and the Li family returned to Zhongzhou State, or even swept the entire Dark World, the 20% interests of the East Emperor Palace was almost unimaginable. This was the second time that the Flourishing Age Fund had invested in the East Emperor Palace. Even if the shares of the Chang'an Club were not included, the amount of the 2 investments had already reached 10 billion. If the East Emperor Palace developed smoothly, In the follow-up detailed investment plan, the Flourishing Age Fund would provide the East Emperor Palace with no less than 100 billion and some needed help. Of course, the premise of all this was that the East Emperor Palace had a bright future and could continue to grow. At this stage, in terms of funds, the East Emperor Palace, which had a huge investment, had a good starting point. With money, they could naturally lay a big foundation in Tianan. From the beginning to the development conditions, the East Emperor Palace had already met 20% interests in the future. Li Tianlan didn't think it was a bad deal. The Flourishing Age Fund valued the potential of the East Emperor Palace, and Li Tianlan also valued the Han family's transcendent position in Zhongzhou state. For some things, the Dongqing clan with a clear position could not come forward, but the Han family might be able to solve them. Li Tianlan put away the contract in front of him and still looked calm. On the eve of his departure for Eastern Europe, it was a happy thing to be able to further cooperate with the Han family. Happy cooperation. Li Tianlan nodded and said. Opposite him, Han Donglu, the patriarch of the Han family, coughed and said with a smile, "When will we leave?" "Everything is settled. If there are no accidents, we will leave tonight," Li Tianlan said lightly. In order to finalize the investment, Han Donglu personally flew from Huading to Yuzhou to meet him. Not to mention his sincerity, the other party dared to pay before the end of the chaos in Eastern Europe. Even Li Tianlan had to admit Han Donglu's courage in investment. "You should have waited." Li Tianlan lit a cigarette and took a drag. "After I came back from Eastern Europe, wouldn't it be safer for you to invest?" "Safer?" Han Donglu couldn't help laughing. "If I pursued stability, I would be in the industry. How can there be absolute stability in the industry I am in? In the industry we are in, no matter how cautious we are in advance, how comprehensive the analysis is, and how well prepared we are once we start, it looks like a gamble. How can there be stability? What I want is profit, not stability. Of course, if you tell me that when you come back from Eastern Europe, I can still get 20% of the East Emperor Palace's interest with my current investment quota, then I will definitely wait. The question is, do you agree?" "Of course not." Li Tianlan laughed. The current situation was unclear, and the risk of the trip to Eastern Europe was huge. At this time, if Han Donglu paid for 20% of the East Emperor Palace's interest, no one would suffer a loss. But if Li Tianlan didn't die in Eastern Europe and returned victorious, then both Li Tianlan and the East Emperor Palace would have a different value. Li Tianlan could still take out 20% of the shares, but if Han Donglu wanted to hold it in his hand, it would be at a different price. So after my team's analysis, we agreed that investing in the East Emperor Palace is the best choice. I know the current situation. You have a good set of cards in your hand. If you play them well, you may win. If I invest now, as long as you can come back alive, I will make a profit. If you die, I will just lose an investment. Although the amount will be large, there will also be an opportunity in Zhongzhou state at that time. I can get back the loss with interest." Han Donglu's eyes were clear and frank. Looking at Li Tianlan's eyes that suddenly sharpened, he smiled and shook his head. "Don't look at me like that. I'm just telling the truth, although it's not pleasant to hear. Tell me something you like to hear. Since I chose to invest at this time, I have confidence in you. I often tell the elites of the Flourishing Age Fund that you can doubt everything in finance and investment, but you can't doubt your own vision and confidence the most. Doubt will lead to hesitation. If you hesitate, you will have concerns. The more you hesitate, the more concerns you have. In the end, you will be wishy-washy. 9 out of 10 you will lose money. Tianlan, you have a strong force in your hands now. In the chaos of Eastern Europe, not to mention victory, as long as you are not stupid, you will definitely have a chance to protect yourself. The Flourishing Age Fund's requirement for you is not victory. As long as you come back alive, even if you have no achievements, it will be a victory. Whether it is Old Gu or Tianzong, they pushed you to this position not to prevent you from making achievements, but to make it clear that they want to kill you. If you don't die when you return to Zhongzhou state, the East Emperor Palace will definitely have a strong momentum. My investment is equivalent to getting back the cost. You have so many trump cards now. I think it should not be difficult for you to protect yourself. As for the timing of the investment, well, of course there are risks. It's not that no one has advised me, nor that I am domineering. It's just that the reasons to persuade me are not enough to persuade me to change my mind. You are now facing great difficulties in life and death crises. But the problem is your future path. Before you reach the peak, you will constantly encounter life and death crises all the way. This time you are in danger in Eastern Europe, so I won't invest. But what if you come back? Let's not talk about my loss. After you come back, the Wang family of Beihai and Kunlun City will certainly not let you go. Their means against you will be more and more intense. This time I won't invest. Should I wait for the next time? What if you are in more danger next time? Should I invest or not? Don't you hesitate? I hate hesitation. If I hesitate, there is the possibility of giving up. And I don't like to give up. Many investors have given up some opportunities to strengthen themselves because of hesitation. Of course, more people have avoided failure because of the same hesitation. Facts seem to prove that their vision is right. Because those they gave up because of hesitation at the beginning all failed and lost money later, so they think that their vision is very high and they are complacent. But in my opinion, those are all idiots. They didn't invest. In the end, they saw the failure of a project and were glad that they avoided losses. But they didn't think that if they had participated in the investment, maybe a project wouldn't have failed. Instead, they would have seen more opportunities. What is the peak? After all, it is false to reach the peak by one's own strength. Even fairy tales dare not write it like this. The real peak has always been reached by a group of people supporting each other. Tianlon, you and I are cooperating now. Before your potential disappears, you don't have to worry about my sincerity. I am very interested in the 20% interest of the East Emperor Palace in the future. At present, there is no bargaining chip that can make me lose this interest. Some people in Zhou State have already said that you are the chosen one. With your current achievements, you deserve the title of the chosen one. If one day you become a real chosen one, I can't imagine how much your power will expand. For example, the Wang family of Beihai, their ancestors used to be the chosen one. After hundreds of years and 9 consecutive generations, they can still be regarded as the strongest force in the dark world. I also can't imagine their expansion and status at their peak. If you reach that height in the future, the 20% interest of the East Emperor Palace may be 3 flourishing age funds, 5, or even 10 flourishing age funds. With such great interest and enough hope, of course, I am willing to support you. Not only me, but many people are willing to support you. But it is the most correct for you to choose me and I to choose you. In Zhou State, in terms of economic strength, especially cash, even the Wang family of Beihai dare not easily say that they are stronger than me. The Flourishing Age Fund is rich and crazy enough. If you can prove your value, I dare to pay for your value. If you don't invest now and hesitate when you reach the peak or near the peak, the investment will be meaningless. At that time, you probably won't release 2% of the shares, let alone 20%. He paused, looked at the calm and peaceful Li Tianlon and said with a smile, and even if my investment fails, the Han family's foundation is there. Even if Kunlun City and the Wang family of Beihai have 3 heads and 6 arms, can they tear me apart? I am not as strong as them, but I have cooperation with them. If the Flourishing Age Fund suddenly collapses, not to mention me, they will first suffer a heavy loss. Li Tianlon was silent for a long time. Han Donglu, who always said one thing and did not talk nonsense, also looked at Li Tianlon for a long time. His eyes were playful, thoughtful, and expectant. He had seen Li Tianlon a few days ago in the Sky Academy. Today, when he saw him again, Li Tianlon gave him a completely different feeling. That was not a completely different person after the transformation of power. But at this time, compared with a few days ago, Li Tianlon had an attitude that he had never had before. A few days ago, Li Tianlon was sharp and indifferent. But no matter what he did, he seemed to be drifting with the current, as if he had no clear goal and starting point, so he had no pursuit. But now Li Tianlon had changed. He was still himself. What changed was his attitude. His eyes would often flash with a light similar to that of contemplation. That was not thinking. It was pursuit. This young man, who was only 22 years old, was now at the forefront of Zhou State for the first time. At this time he seemed to be doing his best to pursue. He was looking for his position. Han Donglu laughed. Tianlon, even if you don't believe in my sincerity, you shouldn't doubt your ability. You are the chosen one. Your 20% interest in the future has a fatal attraction for anyone. There are not many people in Zhou State who can fully support you, but you can always find some. Except for some forces of the Dongqing clan and the Li family, there is only me who has the guts and position to support you. As if thinking of something, Han Donglu's voice was a little gentle. I didn't doubt it. Li Tianlon said. He had investigated a lot of information about the Han family through the curtain in Huading, and it was very detailed. With enough knowledge, he had never doubted Han Donglu. because he did not doubt himself. He firmly believed that he would be invincible in the world and sweep the entire dark world. Naturally, he could also realize what the 20% interest of East Emperor Palace meant in the future. Just as Han Donglu had said, it might be 3 or 5. Or even more than the sum of the Flourishing Age Fund. The Flourishing Age Fund was huge. That was one of the most powerful financial giants in the world. In terms of the scale of the Flourishing Age Fund, their development had actually reached a bottleneck or the ceiling of their current business model. Next, unless Han Donglu could directly control rather than simply influence the financial order of a country, a state, or even the world, it would be difficult for them to make a breakthrough. This was Han Donglu's peak. And after the peak, it was naturally downhill. So the Han family and the Flourishing Age Fund had reached the juncture of seeking change. Li Tianlan's appearance was undoubtedly an opportunity for them to seek change. As Han Donglu himself said, as long as Li Tianlan could guarantee his strength, his sincerity could be completely trusted. Li Tianlan was very sure of this, because it meant that in the future the Flourishing Age Fund would have a much larger harvest. And this understanding until a long time later, when he really realized what the Flourishing Age Fund meant, he found how absurd his original understanding was. Happy cooperation, Boss Han. Li Tianlan took the initiative to reach out and hold Han Donglu's palm. Han Donglu personally poured a cup of iced tea for Li Tianlan and raised his glass with a smile. To our future. The teacups clinked together. The conversation between the two sides seemed to have become more relaxed. Has the list of the Snowdance Corps been determined? Han Donglu asked. The transfer order has just been issued. There is a meeting at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. After the meeting, I will go directly to Im. Li Tianlan said thoughtfully. The high-level list of the Snowdance Corps was officially determined last night, and it was confirmed that Li Tianlan, the commander of the Snowdance Corps, had the power to fine-tune the division of labor of the Snowdance Corps according to the situation in Eastern Europe. The total number of people in the Snowdance Corps was 19,832. It was composed of dozens of departments such as the Border Control Corps, Sai City, Jade Pool, Mount Shu, Shadow Sting Army, Beihai Corps, Kunlun City, Oriental Excalibur, Totem, Divine Light, Zhongzhou State Special Operations Brigade, Shadow Sect, Azura Path, Butterfly, and so on. It had a huge span from the military to the special warfare system, to the special forces, to the martial arts forces. The commander of the army was Li Tianlan, and he was awarded the rank of marshal. Qin Qingwan of the Beihai Corps was appointed as the vice-marshal of the Snowdance Corps, and he was awarded the rank of general. Gu Tiankong, the pavilion master of Wind Snow School of Kunlun City, was appointed as the inspector of the Snowdance Corps, and he was awarded the rank of general. Cool Breeze of Sai City, Drifting Cloud, was appointed as the deputy marshal, and he was awarded the rank of lieutenant general. Hua Qingfeng, the master of the Shadow Sect, was the chief of staff with the same rank as the deputy commander. The two major generals of the Border Control Corps, Li Zhonghu and Sun Mengran, were transferred to the Snowdance Corps and served as the two division commanders. The swordsmen of Jade Pool and Mount Shu formed an assassination group, codenamed Secret Sword. All the lists were officially formed and fully respected Li Tianlan's will. Li Tianlan had been paying attention to the desert. After Li Huaqing personally intervened, Fireman had walked out of the desert prison and would probably arrive in Yuzhou tonight. When this force entered Eastern Europe, it was bound to form a frenzy to attack the superpowers. Knights Templars and the Jiang family of South America would bear the brunt. Li Tianlan narrowed his eyes, thinking about his duties and the oath he made to the sea in the final battle of Heaven Capital more than 3 years ago. He would destroy the Jiang family of South America in his lifetime. He didn't know if the Jiang family of South America had forgotten that sentence. But the sea would not forget it. He would not forget it either. I have a question. Li Tianlan took a sip of tea and suddenly said. Go ahead. Han Donglu smiled. Is it related to the Snowdance Corps? Oh, it's a personal question. I just want to satisfy my curiosity. Li Tianlan smiled. In the past few days he had asked a lot of people a question. Dongqing Wudi by Zhanfang, Li Zhonghu, Li Honghe and Qin Weibai. Even when he met with the senior leaders of the Snowdance Corps, he also asked Yun Qinshi, Han Chongyang and Cool Breeze and Drifting Cloud. But he never got the answer. Some people really didn't know. But there were also some people who knew the answer but didn't tell him. But the answer was always there. Before the expedition, looking at the biggest financial tycoon in the country in front of him, Li Tianlan's heart moved. Out of curiosity, he once again asked the question that he thought had nothing to do with him before, but now he had been thinking about it. Boss Han, do you have any information on Zhongzhou state in recent decades? Which top masters prefer to keep dogs? This question was really boring and extremely gossipy in the eyes of people who didn't know the inside story. Han Donglu was a little stunned. There was a strange flash in his eyes and then he smiled. Top masters who keep dogs, but I know there is one. Li Tianlan's eyes lit up. Han Donglu's flourishing age fund was huge, but strictly speaking it was a new force. Li Tianlan didn't expect to get an answer from Han Donglu, but the reality gave him a surprise. Boss Han, who are you talking about? Li Tianlan smiled. Han Donglu gave him a strange look. Top master who keeps dogs, isn't it you? I heard you have a golden retriever. Li Tianlan looked at Han Donglu and suddenly had nothing to say. He was a top master in recent decades. Even in recent centuries, with the combat capability of the invincible realm, he could be regarded as a top master in Zhongzhou state. But Li Tianlan didn't ask about himself. He asked about Dongqing Huangtu. But this name seemed to be a taboo in Zhongzhou state, so Li Tianlan could only use everything he knew to find clues about Dongqing Huangtu. But the information he knew about Dongqing Huangtu was too little. Pitifully little. He knew that Dongqing had a dog. He also knew. Li Tianlan suddenly thought of something and said, Boss Han, do you know about the killers in the dark world? I'm talking about the killers of the invincible realm. If Dongqing Huangtu was a taboo, the siege back then was destined to be unknown. But the killer of the invincible realm was a clue. When Qin Weibai talked about Dongqing Huangtu, she once said that in Huading, Dongqing Huangtu had killed the only killer of the invincible realm in the dark world with one move. The invincible realm killed the invincible realm. Just one move. The killer of the invincible realm. Han Donglu frowned. There are relatively few killers of the invincible realm. Killers seldom pay attention to frontal combat. It is said that they are weak in willpower, so it is difficult to break through to the invincible realm. Now, in the dark world, it seems that only Tribulation of Sai City is an invincible realm killer. There was one 3 years ago codenamed Evil, but you killed him. What about before? Li Tianlan asked. Did anyone die in Huading? Died in Huading? Han Donglu looked at Li Tianlan blankly. He suddenly raised his eyebrows. You mean Ghost Moon? Who is Ghost Moon? Li Tianlan asked. That was many years ago. It seems that there was indeed an invincible realm killer called Ghost Moon at that time. I don't pay much attention to this. Wait a minute. As Han Donglu said this, he suddenly raised his eyebrows and shouted at the door, Ao Han. The door of the box was pushed open. A middle-aged man in a black suit and sunglasses, a standard bodyguard outfit, came in. He said respectfully, Boss. This is my bodyguard. Han Donglu introduced him with a smile and asked directly, I seem to have heard you talk about Ghost Moon before. It seems that you said it? This is His Highness Li Tianlan. He is more interested in this matter. Ghost Moon? Ao Han muttered to himself, looked at Li Tianlan and said with a wry smile, Your Highness, he has been dead for many years. He died in Huading? Li Tianlan asked. Yes. Ao Han nodded. It was in Huading Airport. It has been more than 20 years. I was still in Huading Special Operations Bureau. At that time, Ghost Moon sneaked into Huading. I don't know what he wanted to do. Zhongzhou State got the news and sent us to the airport to search. And then? Li Tianlan asked calmly. Ao Han glanced at Li Tianlan. Then he was killed. His eyes were strange and fanatical. He seemed to be a witness of the battle that year. Even after many years, he still had a deep impression of that battle. Li Tianlan subconsciously sat up straight and said calmly, Who killed him? Ao Han wanted to say something but stopped. He looked at Han Donglu and then at Li Tianlan, frowning slightly. Just tell the truth. Han Donglu seemed to think of something, and seemed to understand what Li Tianlan was investigating. It's Marshal Li. Ao Han glanced at Li Tianlan and said with a wry smile, Your Highness, it was your father Li Kuangtu who killed Ghost Moon at the airport. One sword strike. Yuzhou was in a turbulent situation. When the list of the Snowdance Corps was confirmed, the final maneuver of the 2 academies was still going on in the Sky Academy. This was already the 7th day of the maneuver. The maneuver was approaching the second half. In the ward of the Sky Academy, Several members of the East Emperor Palace were bored to death watching the TV broadcast in the ward. They were a little bored. The maneuver of the two academies this time was actually very exciting. But perhaps because the first day was too shocking, the subsequent wonderful maneuver suddenly lost a lot of its appeal. Not to mention the few people from the East Emperor Palace in recent days, even the number of people who came to watch the ceremony had decreased a lot. Such a scene inevitably gave people the impression that this final maneuver was the most valuable, but also the least valuable. It's boring. Li Baitian sat on the bed and ate an apple. He looked at the TV screen dully and suddenly said, Tianlan is going to Eastern Europe tonight. It's too urgent. Give me another 2 months, no, a month and a half. Damn it, in a month my injury will be better. If I go to Eastern Europe at that time, do you think I can be a general? Do you think generals are cabbages? Or the general of the Special Warfare Battalion, who can carry a general star on his shoulder in the Snowdance Corps? At least they are at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm. You can only be a field officer if you go there. Ning Qianqing said disdainfully. Li Baitian cursed, then suddenly laughed and said, a field officer is not a small position. At least I'm a real thunder-shocking realm martial artist, so I should at least be a colonel. Brother Tough, you're different. If you go there, can you be a lieutenant? Tut-tut. As an expert a half-step to the thunder-shocking realm, you can definitely be a lieutenant. He saluted Ning Qianqing and said seriously, hello, Captain Ning. Get lost. Ning Qianqing scolded him rudely. Li Baitian did not refute. He was silent for a while, then shook his head. He muttered to himself, damn it. It was more of a self-deprecation than a tease between the two. In the Snowdance Corps, the generals were at least at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm. They were a field officer and a lieutenant. Not to mention being injured, even in their heyday they could not play a big role. It was better than nothing. However, the commander of such an elite corps, the youngest marshal of the special warfare system, was their brother. The huge gap between them not only brought about disappointment, but also confusion and confusion. I suddenly feel that it's meaningless to stay in the Sky Academy. Li Baitian said in a self-deprecating tone. I'll graduate soon. I can't stay even if I want to. Ning Qianqing's tone was flat. The ward fell silent again. Yu Qingyan, who had considered marrying Ning Qianqing, sat beside him and held his hand. I'll go to Eastern Europe. In front of the window of the ward, Su Chu's tall figure almost blocked the sunlight outside. He suddenly turned around and said. The sun shone on his back and his expression was a little vague. My injuries shouldn't be too big of a problem. I can recover slowly. I'll go to Eastern Europe at least to help young master. Su Chu said. Although his strength had not reached the peak of the thunder-shocking realm, he was a thunder-shocking realm expert with Thunder Vein, so he could not be underestimated. Su Chu did not care about his position. It was also good to follow Li Tianlan and be a bodyguard. What? Li Tianlan suddenly raised his eyebrows. If you go to Eastern Europe, then of course we also. Let's go to Tiannan. A haggard but still pleasant voice suddenly sounded outside the ward. They turned around at the same time. Yu Qingyan cheered, stood up and said with a smile, Sister Yuetong. It was Wang Yuetong who appeared outside the ward. After walking out of Mount Dibbing and giving up the identity of a princess, she did not go to Yuzhou to find Li Tianlan, but went directly to the Sky Academy. So far she had not even called Li Tianlan. Wang Yuetong's face was a little pale, and her beautiful big eyes were a little red and swollen. It seemed that she had cried not long ago. But at this moment, without the identity of a little princess, there was a touch of strength in her eyes. She took Yu Qingyan's hand and shook it hard. Yuetong. Li Baitian looked at her in surprise. You didn't go to Yuzhou to find Tianlan? What can I do with Tianlan? Wang Yuetong's eyes were a little blank. She chuckled and said, with my current strength, if I go to Yuzhou, can I follow him to Eastern Europe? If I go now, I will even be a burden, not to mention help. Ning Qianqing frowned and did not speak. So, Wang Yuetong whispered, go to Tiannan. It will become the most important foundation of Tianlan in the future. You are his brothers and now you are all looking for your own value. I am his woman and I also need to find my own value. She looked at Li Baitian and Ning Qianqing. Our value may be in Tiannan. Tianlan goes to Eastern Europe to deal with the chaos. It is good for us to go to Tiannan first to lay the foundation. Li Tianlan, Wang Yuetong, Ning Qianqing, Li Baitian. All of them were very young. At the age when they could squander their youth, every young person seemed to be confused. They were looking for their own value in confusion. Li Tianlan was also looking for his own direction in confusion. They were all so resolute and so duty-bound. Therefore, some very important things were determined in just a few words. There was no hesitation or hesitation. So there was no worry. It was the afternoon of August 6th in Zhou State. The list of the Zhou State Snowdance Corps was formed. Li Tianlan, the youngest marshal in the special warfare system of Zhou State, led the team north. And the most important team around him, led by Wang Yuetong, began to go south. The light shone down from the sky and the sun turned into moonlight, bright and clear as always. In fact, any beginning that was crowned as great by later generations was just ordinary when things happened at that time. Chapter 408. The glaring fire burned the night sky, and shrill screams spread out in the night. There were flashing police lights on both sides of the road and dense figures were everywhere. The firemen were busy putting out the flames. Black smoke billowed up. The luxurious and exquisite manor in the past had become ruins. Bloody corpses were scattered randomly on the ground and were carried away by doctors and nurses in white. In the cold and murderous atmosphere, Jiang Qianyan, a master on the holy list with the code name Black Hand in the Dark World, looked at the scene with a gloomy face and did not speak for a long time. The fat policeman stood beside Jiang Qianyan with a serious face and kept asking questions. A large number of weapons, even a lot of heavy weapons, were found in the ruined manor, and the assailant attacked the place with the fastest speed and the most violent means. Everything was short. It was hard to say whether it was a battle or a massacre. In less than 3 minutes, dense gunshots boiled in the night, and the roar of bombs rang through half of the city. Blood spurted out in the chaos. One by one, the elites of the Jiang family of South America were destroyed and torn apart by absolute violence. When the fire rose into the sky, the battle was over. This scene suddenly made the local police feel like they were facing a formidable enemy. Coming to the manor with the police were the middle-level heads of the National Security Department. They were standing in front of Jiang Qianyan and asking him all the questions they thought could lead to clues. For example, the origin of the weapons in the manor. For example, the motive of the Jiang family of South America to stay here. For example, whether Jiang Qianyan had offended anyone. Maybe it was the Snow Country Mafia who raided the manor. Jiang Qianyan frowned tightly. His body was no longer trembling, but the irritation and disgust between his eyebrows could not be concealed. Finally, when the fat police chief proposed that Jiang Qianyan must give an explanation, Jiang Qianyan could not bear it any longer. He pulled his fat body over and kicked the middle-level official of the National Security Department away. "Don't mess with me, fat pig. I'm a guest here, not a prisoner. I hope you know your duties." Jiang Qianyan held back his killing intent, slowly put down the policeman and said coldly, "Now take your men and get out." All the policemen nearby were in an uproar. The director, who was no longer young, coughed a few times with difficulty. Just as he was about to order the thugs in front of him to be arrested with a furious face, a group of mysterious people in black suits had entered the scene. There were a total of 8 men in black suits surrounding a middle-aged man in sportswear. The middle-aged man glanced at the embarrassed police chief, frowned slightly and waved his hand casually. The police chief, who was considered a powerful figure in the city, didn't dare to say a word. He couldn't care less about his dignity. He smiled apologetically and began to retreat. At the same time, he took all the policemen nearby with him. "I'm sorry." The middle-aged man walked up to Jiang Qianyan and touched his big nose helplessly. "It happened so suddenly that I couldn't help here. Mr. Jiang, I hope we can get your understanding." Jiang Qianyan managed to control his expression. His eyes softened a little and he said calmly, "It doesn't matter. It's just a pity to destroy the manor you like, Mr. Rekvia. I will compensate you for your loss." Rekvia is not a name. In Eastern Europe, it was an absolutely prominent surname, representing a top wealthy family in Eastern Europe. Perhaps in the whole of Europe, the Rekvia family was not as powerful as the Morton family and the Violet family. But at least in the land of Eastern Europe, Rekvia's authority would not be worse than anyone else's. It was the largest and even the only wealthy family in Wulan State. In Wulan State, the second largest country in Europe, Rekvia was almost synonymous with supremacy. After the collapse of the Polar Ground Alliance, the superpowers of the Dark World entered Eastern Europe one after another. Some found partners on the spot after entering Eastern Europe. Some dark forces already had partners before they entered Eastern Europe. The Rekvia family was the most powerful ally of the Jiang family of South America and Eastern Europe. Therefore, a considerable part of the elites of the Jiang family of South America were concentrated in Wulan State. There were nearly 800 elites in Reki City, the capital of Wulan State alone. This manor was the place provided by the Rekvia family to the Jiang family of South America to settle their own people. Nearly 200 elites all lived here. This group of people just entered Wulan State 2 days ago. They didn't even play their strength in the chaos of Eastern Europe. Because of the raid tonight, they were all wiped out. The most important thing was, within the Jiang family of South America, these 200 people were the direct descendants of Zhou Xian. It's just a property. It's nothing. The current patriarch of the Rekvia family smiled calmly, then narrowed his eyes and said, "It's just that I'm curious about who dares to come to Reki City to be the enemy of the Rekvia family. Mr. Jiang, do you have any clues?" This raid seemed to be a coincidence and deliberate. Zhou Xian was supposed to go to the Rekvia family's dinner today, but when he was still on the way, the manor was attacked. What was more embarrassing was that Zhou Xian set off from here to attend the dinner. When the attack happened, Zhou Xian had just left here for less than 20 minutes. "It's people from Zhongzhou State." Zhou Xian gritted his teeth and said with cold eyes, "Sai City." Sai City was a world-famous city of assassins. The way of assassins was not always deceitful. Especially for the strong, the top assassins were as calm and domineering as anyone else. When Tribulation drove out of Reki City, Situ Songyue had been standing at their original place and waiting for a long time. In the thick night, she was dressed in a white dress and her long hair was blown by the wind. In a trance, she was like a shadow. Tribulation parked the car beside her. Situ Songyue sat in the car and was silent. The car started again. In the car, which was neither fast nor slow, Tribulation suddenly coughed violently. The cough was dull and hoarse. The frequency was not fast, but it was deep, as if it was heart-wrenching. "I'll drive," Situ Songyue said. Tribulation shook his head, waved his hand and reluctantly said, "No need." He coughed for a while, straightened up, wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and was silent for a long time. "There was an accident tonight." After a long time, Tribulation said softly. Situ Songyue, who had been looking at her brother's face, said nothing more. Tonight, the division of labor between the two was very clear. Situ Songyue's goal was a manor in the south of Reki City, while Tribulation's goal was a club in the north of the city. Situ Songyue's move of useless heaven and earth almost completely wiped out the entire manor. After completing the task, she waited for a long time before seeing Tribulation come. Needless to say, she knew that there was an accident tonight. "Can you control your injuries or not?" Situ Songyue asked, frowning tightly. Tribulation was the only invincible realm killer in the Dark World today. Many people knew about this. But few people knew that since he broke through in Heaven Capital, Tribulation's injury had never healed. From the chi-controlling realm to the ice-condensing realm, fire-flaming realm, thunder-shocking realm, and straight into the invincible realm, this road of martial arts was steep and fierce to the extreme. Tribulation proved the feasibility of this road and its strength. Tribulation was very strong now. He had reached the end of this road. If he didn't care about his injury, Tribulation's real combat capability would be far better than Situ Songyue's. It was entirely possible for him to be ranked in the top 10 of the Divine List, or even close to the top 5 of the Divine List. Not to mention the top 5 of the Divine List. As long as he entered the Divine List, Tribulation could be regarded as the only invincible realm killer in the Dark World in the past 100 years to enter the Divine List. But Tribulation's breakthrough was too intense, and the injury left was so serious that it could hardly be healed. It had been more than 3 years since the final battle of Heaven Capital, but Tribulation, who had terrifying combat capability, had not succeeded in stabilizing his realm. His realm went up and down, and sometimes it would fall from the invincible realm. Not to mention his own feelings, Situ Songyue, as his elder sister, was frightened. Tribulation was indeed very strong now, but the strength he could exert now was at most equivalent to the strength before he broke through, or even slightly worse. His injury and body had completely limited his strength. Such a breakthrough was even worse than not breaking through at all. "There is still a chance," Tribulation said blandly. "The jade seal is still in my hands." The jade seal, the jade seal. Situ Songyue sneered and said, without the jade seal that Tianlong gave you, it is unknown whether you can live until now. Judging from your current injury, the jade seal can only save your life at most. Tribulation fell silent. I'll think about it. After a long time he slowly opened his mouth. It's time to make up your mind. At your current age you still have a chance. Situ Songyue said. Tribulation did not speak. He knew what it meant to make up his mind. His current problem was difficult to solve, but in essence it was actually very simple. The power of the invincible realm was very strong. But he went straight from the chi-controlling realm to the invincible realm. This kind of breakthrough was too intense. Although he was lucky to succeed, the huge power of the invincible realm had almost crushed Tribulation's body. Simply speaking, his current body, because of the injury, could not bear the power of the invincible realm at all. And as long as this power was still there, his injury could not be healed. This matter was difficult to solve, or it was difficult to solve it perfectly. At present, the only possibility was that Tribulation chose to lower his realm by himself. If this word was used on other people, it might be barely acceptable. But how cruel it was to be used on Tribulation. Other invincible realm experts would at least be a half-step invincible realm expert if they lowered their realm. If Tribulation chose to leave the invincible realm, he did not enter the ice-condensing realm, the fire-flaming realm, or the thunder-shocking realm. Once he lowered his realm, he would be in the chi-controlling realm. Who could accept this fact? In any case, I have to delay the final battle in Snow Country. Tribulation said softly, before the final battle, I'll try to do as little as possible. In my current state, there are not many opportunities for me to take action. I'll try to use them at the critical moment. Situ Songyue said, yes, we did our duty to deal with the Jiang family of South America tonight and give Zhongzhou State an explanation. What's your plan next? Do it according to the original plan. Tribulation said, go to Snow Country. Situ Songyue glanced at him. Tribulation seemed to realize something and changed his words. Go to Mormons and meet her. Mormons was a city in Snow Country. To go to Mormons was to go to Snow Country. But Tribulation's tone was calm, as if he was emphasizing something. Don't you want to have a look? Situ Songyue was silent for a while and suddenly asked. Tribulation's eyes calmly looked straight at the road ahead in the night. The scenery on both sides of the road quickly went backward in the advance of the vehicles. The car kept speeding up. Tribulation's voice was calm and without any fluctuation. What's there to see? If you want to see, it's naturally good. I don't want to see. Don't want to see? I don't want to see. There was a sudden silence in the car. Only the sound of the engine was roaring. In just a few words, the car had unconsciously reached its limit in Tribulation's hands. He has helped you a lot. Situ Songyue said calmly. When you went up from the chi-controlling realm, you encountered a lot of problems. If she hadn't helped you solve the most critical problem, you might have been stuck there. I saved her life. Tribulation said briefly, that was her reward for me. That was the only mission you failed. If you hadn't fallen in love with her, how could you have given up the mission to save her? Situ Songyue chuckled. The corners of Tribulation's mouth twitched slightly, and his eyes were cold and hard. Go and have a look. Situ Songyue expressed her position. I want to have a look too. I don't want to see it. Tribulation suddenly smiled. It's meaningless. She is not her. There's no need to see it. She is not her. Situ Songyue's eyes were a little dazed. Well, he is not him. She and him. We're not him. If we can see each other again, Situ Songyue laughed at herself. If we can see each other again, it would be best if we are not enemies. Tribulation whispered. The sentence was very clear. Because it was clear it was cruel. It would be best if they were not enemies. If there were enemies who could not distinguish life and death, what was the meaning of the word best? Tribulation looked ahead. His eyes were dazed and calm. Trance and calmness were constantly alternating. The corners of his mouth were raised and his smile was a little complicated. You are not reconciled. Situ Songyue said calmly. So what if I am not reconciled? Tribulation whispered. When she was still a holy punishment priest, I couldn't take her away. What can I do now? In fact, I understood that I had the power to take her away, but I didn't have that kind of will. She wouldn't go with me. I'm an assassin and she's a priest. Now I'm a highness among killers and she's the Holy Virgin of the Vatican. When we parted that year, We knew very well that she could only be the Holy Virgin and would never be Mrs. Situ. So in the darkness of that year, the young man named Situ Wanjia was most thoroughly immersed in the killing of the dark shadow. He became a pure tribulation. Whether willing or not, there would be many firsts in life. Many firsts might be against one's will, but strictly speaking it was not difficult. Because there was no choice. But it was the most difficult to repeat life without choice. The afterglow of the polar sun was getting dimmer. Under the soft sunlight, Lishi stood in front of the window of the Jelly Country Hotel, looking at the bustling scene outside, and her eyes became more and more dull. She was afraid of the repetition of fate and choices. But the purpose of her trip was to repeat. She repeatedly killed one person, killed two people. She repeatedly killed people she didn't want to kill. She repeatedly killed people she had killed but didn't kill. This feeling was very torturous. But after suffering became a habit, it became numb and ignorant coldness and exhaustion. Exhaustion became eagerness. She wanted to end all eagerness. As long as it was over. No matter how it ended, it didn't matter. As long as it was over. In the sunny night, Lishi turned around and took out her mobile phone to make a call. The phone was quickly connected. A calm and cautious voice sounded. Hello. This is Lishi. Lishi held the phone and spoke in a brief tone. There was a long silence on the other end of the phone. Lishi had been silent for so long that everyone outside Kunlun City seemed to have forgotten her existence. After a long time, the voice on the phone sounded again. Hello madam, where are you now? I'm at the Oga Hotel. I like it here very much. You don't have to pick me up. Lishi said calmly. The man on the phone was silent again for a while and then whispered, Okay madam. Lishi held the phone quietly and was silent for a long time before she said flatly, Is there any news from the purgatory of heaven capital? We are currently investigating, but it is certain that daybreak of the purgatory of heaven capital has entered Eastern Europe, but we are still unable to determine deity's whereabouts. On the phone the man's voice was cautious. Keep investigating. Lishi said lightly, In the chaos of Eastern Europe, the only thing you need to do is to determine the whereabouts of deity of the purgatory of heaven capital. The man responded calmly. Lishi hung up the phone in silence and sat on the bed. The bed was very soft. However, an even more obvious fatigue engulfed her like a tide, bringing with it a suffocating sense of oppression. Lishi closed her eyes and fell on the bed. She didn't want to be sorry to the Li family. But in the end she stabbed him in the heart and the key point of the entire Li family. She didn't want to help Gu Xingyun now. But because of Li Qingqing she had to come to Eastern Europe. She had been silent for most of her life. But when she needed to do something, fate would always push her body and push her in the opposite direction of her will. She had long been tired of such a life and spurned the world. So this time she obeyed Gu Xingyun's orders, but she did not intend to completely obey Gu Xingyun's orders. The sky in Kunlun City was too cold. Gu Xingyun's face was too disgusting. In the icy and snowy Eastern Europe she really had the idea to end all this. She couldn't resist Gu Xingyun. But she didn't intend to fight for the interests of Kunlun City in Eastern Europe. In this cold but quiet place, if she could drag the man who she didn't know was called deity or Li Guangtu to go with her. For her, that was the best ending. Eastern Europe. At 2 o'clock in the middle of the night, a flight from Zhou State to Snow Country landed smoothly at the capital airport after a connecting flight from Snow Country to Immerse. The capital airport had been completely under martial law a day ago. All flights had stopped operating. The martial law had lasted from the early morning of the previous day to the present. The entire Immerse officials seemed to be quietly waiting for the landing of the special plane. Lieutenant General Qing Huaining, the new commander of the Arctic Ocean Command of Zhou State, stood in the airport in a military uniform. He stood tall and straight and was calm and composed, surrounded by a group of senior officials of Immerse. The Immerse officials attached great importance to the pickup. Not only did they agree that the order of the airport would be maintained by the Zhou State garrison, but they also sent Immerse's Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Affairs Minister, Trace, to lead a large team that was comparable to the foreign investigation team to meet them in person. The huge plane was taxiing on the runway and the roar was getting closer and closer. Qing Huaining glanced at the plane, glanced at Immerse's Foreign Affairs Minister Trace beside him and said with a smile, His Highness, they are transferring from Snow Country. There are some problems in Snow Country which delayed some time. Mr. Prime Minister, if there is no accident this time when His Highness goes back, maybe Zhou State will consider establishing a direct route from Zhou State to Im. At that time please support us, Mr. Prime Minister. A direct route from Zhou State to Im. Terence was stunned and then he was ecstatic. He nodded and said, of course I will support it. General Qing, I personally yearn for Zhou State. I am also willing to urge the government to strengthen the bilateral relationship between Im and Zhou State. Qing Huaining nodded with a smile. Once the direct route from Zhou State to Im was established, Zhou State would benefit, but the government of Im would benefit the most. Im had no reason not to agree. The support he mentioned was undoubtedly not the support of the route, but the position and performance of Im in the chaos in Eastern Europe. Some time ago the president of Im personally met Jiang Qianyan of the Jiang family of South America. Now, although he was still friendly to Zhou State, people with discerning eyes could see that his attitude had gradually wavered. Qing Huaining had just arrived at the Arctic Ocean Command, so he naturally did not want to see this happen. Im was one of the garrisons of the Arctic Ocean Command. If he switched sides to the Jiang family of South America, it would not only be trouble for him but also lose his face. The plane slowly stopped. The cabin opened. The gangway was lowered. In the silence, one after another, officers of the Special Warfare System of Zhou State in military uniforms got off the plane. The dark green military uniforms occupied the vision of a large number of senior officials of Im. Qing Huaining subconsciously straightened his body. A large number of senior officials from both military and political sides of Im also widened their eyes. They all knew a name. That name now meant the strongest among the younger generation in the Dark World. Everyone wanted to see the demeanor of the young chosen one. Officers appeared one after another. Some were tough, some were quiet, some were calm, and some were wild. Terence, the official leader of Im, was dazzled. A young man in the same military uniform finally came out of the cabin. Terence glanced at him casually and ignored him. He was still looking for the legendary young marshal of Zhou State. Qing Huaining straightened his body at the first time. Salute. Near the airport, all the garrison troops of Zhou State stood at attention and saluted at the same time. Lieutenant General Qing Huaining of the Arctic Ocean Command of Zhou State pays respect to Your Highness. Qing Huaining's steady and loud voice resounded through the entire airport. Terence was startled and his eyes subconsciously shifted to the young man. Then he shifted back. He was a young man who couldn't be any more ordinary. Although the marshal's military uniform was very conspicuous, but it always made people unable to help but ignore his existence. He was standing there clearly, but it gave people the feeling that he didn't notice him at all. The young man slowly went down the gangway and raised his hand to salute back. As he walked, he was like a transparent shadow that was illusory, indistinct, and calm and collected. But the moment he raised his hand, the entire airport suddenly became incomparably real. He stood there quietly and saluted back. But the illusory feeling of being ignored just now completely disappeared. The lights of the airport shone on his military uniform and rank. The light was boundless. General Ning. Li Tianlong put down his arm, held Qing Huaining's hand and said with a chuckle, "Thank you for your hard work." It was late at night on August 7th in Eastern Europe. Under the attention of all the dark forces in the world, the Snowdance Corps of Zhou State came. The light of the polar sun was getting dimmer and dimmer. The sun was gradually falling. In the manner of Mormons, Qin Weibai, who had returned from Bayou State, was wearing a coat and standing quietly at the top of the villa, looking at the flowers blooming all over the manor. The flowers were in full bloom in violation of the season and the temperature. There were thousands of colors and vitality everywhere. Qin Weibai looked at them quietly, expressionless. "It's actually very beautiful. Although it's a little messy, it's much better than before." Lin Fingting's voice sounded beside Qin Weibai with a smile. "You don't like it?" "I hate being deceived," Qin Weibai said softly. A scapegoat was not a scapegoat. What she left for Li Tianlong was immortal love. When she returned to the manor and saw the flowers in the garden, Qin Weibai already understood what had happened. But Xianxia had gone far away after doing all this. As for the two senior brothers, according to Xianxia, they were all traveling and couldn't be contacted. Thus, this life force was firmly stuck here and could no longer be erased. Only when you are alive can you be qualified to hate something. Lin Fengting said softly, "This is good, really good." "Maybe." Qin Weibai took a deep breath and said softly, "Xian Yuan sword is already on its way to Eastern Europe. In order to avoid attracting attention, they will come in batches. They will all arrive in Mormons in about a week. What's your arrangement?" Lin Fengting asked. Qin Weibai thought for a moment, shook her head slowly and said, "No, just stay here." "Stay here?" Lin Fengting was a little stunned. Qin Weibai said yes. "The chaos in Eastern Europe." Lin Fengting frowned. "In the end of the chaos there must be a final battle." Qin Weibai said softly, "No matter where we fight, the final battle can only be in Mormons, not anywhere else. In the outsider's impression, the Samsara Palace has been destroyed. I will wait for them here and give everyone a surprise." She looked at Lin Fengting. "Sir, you seem to have forgotten that I said this would be the place of the final battle." "Here?" Lin Fengting looked at Qin Weibai. "What's special here?" "In the whole of Eastern Europe, this is the most special place." Qin Weibai laughed. "Sir, you can think of this as a base set up by the Samsara Palace here. The Samsara Palace owns more than a manor in Mormons, but some things can't be seen until the final battle." Lin Fengting looked at Qin Weibai for a long time before he nodded. "I'll wait and see." Qin Weibai didn't speak. She just looked up at the polar sun in the sky. The polar sun slowly sank and finally disappeared completely from sight. There was no day and night in the polar sun. The sun would rise again the moment it set. But today, however, the setting sun did not appear after it set. Before the lights of Mormons came on, the polar sun disappeared. The thick and deep night enveloped the whole world in an instant. A pale green light suddenly lit up in the dark sky, which was as silent as a grave. The light danced in the sky, reflecting the entire night sky with incomparable brilliance. That was the most beautiful spectacle in the world. The polar night aurora. The temperature of Mormons was dropping. The wind was dancing wildly in the darkness. The cold wind blew over and messed up Qin Weibai's long hair that was tied up. She stood quietly, but her hair suddenly flew under the laser, extremely presumptuous. Qin Weibai raised her head and still stared at the night high in the sky. The aurora in the sky kept flickering in her eyes. Only the darkness grew deeper. The everlasting night officially arrived. Chapter 409. In a capitalist country, power could block a lot of things, but it could not block the media. In Europe, perhaps not all media companies had the status of a giant, but any super tycoon would definitely have extraordinary power in the media field. So when a group of middle-level and high-level officers of the Snowdance Corps walked out of Im Airport, the cameras of countless media were flashing. The dark green military uniform that appeared in Im seemed to have become a picture full of power, which was transmitted to all corners of Eastern Europe in the fastest time. Li Tianlan. This name, which had just appeared on the stage of the Dark World, was still strange to most people. Perhaps the deepest impression he left on the Dark World was his decisiveness in breaking into the invincible realm in the decisive Battle of Heaven Capital 3 years ago, and his amazing sword in the maneuver of the 2 academies of Zhongzhou State not long ago. Most people might not know what this young marshal of Zhongzhou State meant. But without accurate cognition, it did not mean that he would be ignored. A young marshal full of vigor and sharpness at a young age, and an elite special warfare battalion with a luxurious lineup. This force was no less than anyone in Eastern Europe. No one would ignore them and no one dared to ignore them. The northernmost part of Snow Country had ushered in the polar night. The ink-like darkness enveloped Vasilis Cathedral. The lights in the church were almost dazzling and looked particularly brilliant in the night. The polar day and the polar night alternated. The daylight disappeared late at night. Darkness enveloped the morning. When the brilliant aurora in the sky slowly dissipated, the whole world seemed to become dead silent. The Holy Virgin of the Vatican Angel stood on the bell tower of the church and watched the light filling the night gradually disappear. She slowly turned around and looked at the TV screen on the indoor wall. Eastern European news was playing on the screen. For all of Eastern Europe, this was a new TV channel. It was a new news channel set up by Daqin International Media in Eastern Europe about a month ago. Daqin International was in Bayou State. However, the Eastern European News Channel gathered the major events of all the countries in Eastern Europe and broadcast them in the news. In the chaotic land full of interests, blood, power, and beliefs, the Eastern European News Channel had undoubtedly become a sharp sword in the hands of the Qin family in Bayou country. On the TV screen, the dignified and elegant host was telling about a mysterious attack that took place in Reki city of Wulan state an hour ago. The fire in the live video was still not extinguished. The chaotic lights and the crowd kept moving in the flickering. The doctors and nurses of Reki city kept carrying the bodies onto the stretchers. The beautiful manor had become ruins. The camera kept shaking. Intentionally or unintentionally, Zhou Xian's gloomy face and Rekvia's face appeared in the camera for a moment. Angel watched in silence. The presenter's voice in the news was soft and low, with a bit of solemnity and compassion. It sounded emotional, but after listening to it for a long time, it always sounded routine. The scene in the news changed and the sky above the capital of Im appeared. Compared with the solemnity of Wulan state, Im in the picture was only majestic. The dark green military uniforms and military ranks of Xianxia state appeared on the TV screen, but all of them had the same back view. They were silent, resolute, and had a sense of forbearance and strength. There was a row of black cars lined up in front of the airport. Countless soldiers of Xianxia state got into the cars. The vehicles, like a long line, started slowly. From beginning to end, the faces of these soldiers were never photographed. Angel was not sure what this meant. Compared with Zhou Xian's face that appeared in the camera intentionally or unintentionally in Wulan state, the backs of Xianxia state's soldiers were somewhat meaningful. Was this the position and attitude that the Eastern European news had not clearly expressed? Behind the Eastern European news was the Qin family of Baiyu state. The Qin family, which was close to the Qin clan. In the chaos of Eastern Europe, the position of the Qin family was definitely one of the things that attracted the most attention. Angel wasn't sure if the news was telling the truth. It was the Jiang family of South America that was attacked in Wulan state. Angel looked at the ending news screen, thought for a moment, and then slowly said, "Obviously." A soft but somewhat evil voice sounded. "I talked to Zhou Xian on the phone. It was the two highnesses of Sai City in Xianxia state who attacked. Not only the manor on TV, but also another club in Reki city where the elites of the Jiang family of South America were placed suffered heavy losses. This is the revenge of Xianxia state." Not far from Angel sat a very quiet man. A man with a unique temperament. His appearance was between that of a young man and a middle-aged man, and his figure was slightly thin. He seemed to be handsome but also very ordinary. The light shone on him. His smile was quiet and calm, but his face was a little blurred. He was the chief knight of Knights Templars. In the Dark World, his identity was the Master of Knights Templars, an invincible realm expert. Chaos. Angel glanced at him. Hearing the two highnesses of Sai City, her eyes were a little complicated. But when her eyes fell on Chaos, her eyes had become calm. "You don't seem to be worried?" Angel asked. Chaos looked at the face behind the veil, which was even blurrier than his. His eyes were gentle and humble, but behind this facade, there was a scorching heat that could burn everything. Chaos looked at him for a long time. He bowed slightly and said calmly, "I don't know what your Highness Holy Virgin means." The status of the chief knight of Knights Templars was very high in the Dark World. But the entire Knights Templars was a vassal institution of the Vatican. Its position within the Vatican was even lower than that of the bishops, the saint warriors, and the holy punishment priests. Strictly speaking, it was not an institution that could sit in front of the Holy Virgin. He could sit in front of Angel calmly because he was an invincible realm expert. That was all. "You know very well." Angel looked into Chaos's eyes. "You know that this is the revenge of Xianxia state. Your Excellency, what reason do you have to think that Xianxia state will only retaliate against the Jiang family of South America and let Knights Templars go? You joined hands with the Jiang family of South America and killed not only the elites of Samsara Palace, but also the garrison of Xianxia state. This is very stupid. Should I congratulate you for attracting the attention of Xianxia state?" Chaos was silent for a while. After a long time he slowly said, "I didn't slaughter the garrison of Xianxia state." Angel nodded. "Sounds like it's true. But does anyone believe it?" She looked at Chaos coldly. "I don't believe it. It doesn't matter whether you believe it or not." Chaos shook his head. "No means no. I will explain it to Xianxia state. They believe it, and then the two have nothing to do with each other. They don't believe it. Knights Templars has never been afraid of war since its establishment. I will also shoulder my responsibilities. Your Highness Holy Virgin can rest assured that the victory in the chaos of Eastern Europe belongs to the Vatican and Knights Templars. I appreciate a lot of qualities. Angel's tone was cold. But I don't appreciate arrogance. Your Excellency, your courage is commendable, but your stupidity is equally surprising. You are not afraid of war, but from the standpoint of the Vatican at this stage, neither the Vatican nor Knights Templars should attract the attention of Xianxia state. In the chaos of Eastern Europe, Xianxia state has not only the two highnesses of Sai City, but also a more terrifying majesty, a younger highness and an entire special warfare battalion. In the face of such power, what is Knights Templars? Chaos narrowed his eyes, lowered his head and remained silent. You said you didn't slaughter the garrison of Xianxia state. Angel took a deep breath, stood up and said slowly, I don't believe it. No one believes it. But I can give you 3 days. Within 3 days, come up with a reason that everyone can believe. Your Excellency, I'll wait for your news. It was a long time. In the oppressive silence, Chaos also stood up. You don't want to provoke Xianxia state. He looked at Angel. Is it because of fear? Angel pointed to the door with a poker face and said blandly, no matter what, this is my order. Chaos twitched the corner of his mouth and nodded. I will try my best. He turned around and strode out of the bell tower. Angel looked at his back. His back was very straight and fearless. Fearlessness was precious, but sometimes, it seemed extremely arrogant. Angel turned around and looked out of the window. The everlasting night outside the window was getting darker and darker. The sun had fallen and it would not rise for a long time. Angel looked at it quietly and muttered to herself, the arrogant will pay the price. Outside the bell tower, Chaos, who had walked out of the bell tower, was also looking at the light inside the bell tower and whispered, the coward will lose everything. Was a small country. With an area of more than 20,000 square kilometers, it was even less than the smallest province in Xianxia state. Not to mention the whole world, even in Europe or even limited to Eastern Europe, was not eye-catching. In the past 100 years, this was a country that had always been in a state of ups and downs, and it was also one of the small countries with the most frequent civil strife in Eastern Europe. At the most chaotic time, had 12 governments in 10 years, which was simply dazzling. This situation lasted until Xianxia state gave assistance. After Xianxia state helped the chaos slowly calmed down. At that time, at the delicate moment when the major forces in Eastern Europe checked and balanced each other and did not want to easily intervene in the chaos of the assistance of Xianxia state was thunderous. The first army that appeared in was about 8,000 people, not many, but they were famous. After the troop codenamed Desolate Border returned to Xianxia state, they really went to Desolate Border, which was the predecessor of today's Border Control Corps. At that time it was Li Honghe, the state-protecting war god of Xianxia state, and Li Guangtu, the two highnesses who personally led the troops to support The father and son stood in faced the various means of many Eastern European forces, and finally nailed the garrison near the capital of At that time this was the first garrison of Xianxia state stationed in Eastern Europe. Later, Xianxia state used the garrison as a starting point and spent several years slowly building the Arctic Ocean Command that deterred the whole of Eastern Europe. So when it came to the Li family and Xianxia state, there were too many soul-stirring, heartwarming or blood-boiling stories in between. Li Tianlong now led the Snowdance Corps to When he thought about it carefully, it seemed that it was really a bit predestined. Perhaps because he knew all the stories of that year, Li Tianlong had been silent since he walked out of the airport. The motorcade entered the capital from the airport in silence, and then entered the garrison camp of Xianxia state. Terence, the deputy prime minister of and the foreign minister, had already confirmed the itinerary of the president and the prime minister. After booking the welcome dinner tomorrow evening, he left. Lieutenant General Qing Huaining, the former commander of the Black Dragon Army of the Border Control Corps and the current commander of the Arctic Ocean Command, invited Li Tianlong to his study and said that he wanted to report on work. The logistics director of the Arctic Ocean Command began to arrange accommodation for the officers of the Snowdance Corps. After the attack, Xianxia state was furious, and the number of garrison troops in continued to increase. Now there were nearly 20,000 troops of Xianxia state stationed in The exact number was 19,832. There were nearly 20,000 people in the garrison camp, but no one in the camp belonged to the garrison of the Arctic Ocean Command. At this time, it was the entire Snowdance Corps that was stationed in Im. The ordinary soldiers of the Snowdance Corps had entered Eastern Europe in batches before the high-level list was confirmed. As soon as the officers were in place today, the entire Snowdance Corps had begun to operate. Li Tianlan didn't care about the 9 officers. It took a process for the officers and the army to get familiar with each other, even if they were all elites. He followed Qing Huaining to the study in silence. He sat down in silence. Qing Huaining turned on the TV without saying a word and watched the recently popular Eastern European news channel. The two of them sat on the sofa, ignoring each other without even a cup of tea. Qing Huaining took out a cigarette and lit it. He didn't give it to Li Tianlan. He crossed his legs and watched the TV with relish. Li Tianlan sat there in silence, motionless and silent. Less than 5 minutes passed. There was a knock on the door, slowly, neither fast nor slow. Qing Huaining frowned and said loudly, "Come in, please." The door was pushed open. A slender and somewhat effeminate man walked in slowly with a peaceful smile. "Vice Marshal Qin?" Qing Huaining stood up with a smile and shook hands with the effeminate man. Li Tianlan still didn't move. Qin Qingwan, the vice marshal of the Snowdance Corps, walked into the study. A trace of displeasure flashed through his heart, but he didn't show it. He also knew that it was a little abrupt and unsightly for him to come over. But he was the vice marshal of the Snowdance Corps. In addition to the responsibilities given to him by Zhongzhou State, he also had other tasks. Qing Huaining and Li Tianlan. Both of their positions were very sensitive. He had to know what they talked about and what arrangements they had so that he could play a role in the next action. Li Tianlan gave him the cold shoulder so he could only put up with it. "Your Highness, General Qing, what are you talking about?" Qin Qingwan asked with a smile. "We're just watching TV. We didn't talk about anything." Qing Huaining smiled and asked Qin Qingwan to sit down. Qin Qingwan rolled his eyes and glanced at Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan still sat in that position. In a trance, his figure seemed to shake slightly and become more and more illusory. Qin Qingwan suddenly felt that something was wrong. He frowned and tentatively called, "Your Highness." Qing Huaining smiled but didn't say anything. He looked at Qin Qingwan with a well-concealed mockery in his eyes. Qin Qingwan's face changed. He suddenly walked over and reached out as if to put his hand on Li Tianlan's shoulder intimately. His palm fell but he touched nothing. His palm passed through Li Tianlan's body. Li Tianlan's figure shook in the study and then disappeared completely. Qin Qingwan froze and turned to look at Qing Huaining. At this moment he vaguely seemed to understand why he hadn't seen the legendary bodyguard beside Li Tianlan since he got off the plane. Because he didn't see the 2 deputy commanders of the Snowdance Corps, let alone the 2 sword masters of Mount Shu. "What are you thinking about, Vice Marshal Qin?" Qing Huaining asked with a smile and pointed to the TV. "Watch the news." In the news, the dignified and beautiful host was telling about a mysterious attack in Reki City, the capital of Wulan State. Qing Huaining was watching the news. Jiang Qinyan was also watching the news. The Eastern European news channel was really popular. At least the superpowers in Eastern Europe were paying close attention to this channel every day. The losses after the attack tonight had been sorted out as quickly as possible. The manor plus the club, Situ Songyue and Tribulation attacked at the same time. Less than 80 of the 400 elites survived. Nearly half of the elites of the Jiang family of South America stationed in Reki City were lost. This result made Jiang Qinyan lose all his good mood, but he didn't know who to vent his anger on. He brought the remaining 70 or so elites with him. The Rekvia family had rearranged a manor for him. Back in the manor, Jiang Qinyan stared absent-mindedly at the Eastern European news on TV. His eyes were cold and he wondered if he should report the loss to his elder brother. In the news screen, the faces of Jiang Qinyan and Shenker, the current patriarch of Rekvia, flashed in the picture. Soon after, the news skipped and the backs of Im and the Snowdance Corps appeared. It was the backs. Jiang Qinyan snorted heavily and muttered to himself, "The Qin family." He took out his cell phone and was about to dial when the doorbell suddenly rang. Jiang Qinyan frowned and picked up the intercom device beside him. "What's the matter?" "Second Master Mr. Shenker is visiting. He has entered the manor." Shenker Rekvia. Jiang Qinyan froze. He had no reason not to pay attention to his strongest ally in Eastern Europe. He put down the phone, stood up and said, "I'll go down and pick it up." He quickly went downstairs. When he walked out of the main villa, he could already see the lights of a row of motorcades. The motorcade stopped in front of the villa. Xianxia, the patriarch of the Wuxia family who had just parted with Zhou Xian, got out of the car with a smile and shook hands with Zhou Xian. Mr. Jiang, the snow dance corps has entered Eastern Europe. Xianxia chuckled. I know. Zhou Xian nodded. But there is one thing you may not know. In the sequence of the snow dance corps entering there are very few heavyweight experts missing. At present we can't determine their, Zhou Xian. Before Xianxia finished speaking, a flat voice suddenly sounded. The voice was so far away and so real as if it were close to the ear, clear and calm. There were only 3 words in the title. But as the word Nian fell, the whole night sky shook. Zhou Xian. Zhou Xian. Zhou Xian. The empty night seemed to suddenly become a mountain wall, and the clear and empty voice kept echoing in the night. Xianxia's words disappeared in Zhou Qianyan's ears. He suddenly raised his head and looked at the night sky in the distance. The night was deep. A little dot appeared in the deep night. The white dot was very clear, as if it were carved in the illusory night, sharp and clear. The white dot was moving. With incomparably arrogant killing intent, it covered the entire manor. The white dot quickly drew closer, and in a trance, it was like a meteor piercing the darkness. Come. The white dot began to expand and turned white. Wherever the white passed, it instantly drew a 100-meter-long shadow in the night sky. Kill. The white turned into a figure dressed as white as snow. The sword light condensed around the white figure. As the voice fell. In an instant, the overwhelming sword intent surged above the whole sky, like a waterfall flowing straight down, like a raging tide rising to the sky, mighty and roaring. There was no raging fire, no thunder, no void. There was only sword intent. A silver light appeared in Zhou Qianyan's sight. In the sword intent all over the sky, everything around him seemed to disappear completely. The manor, the lawn, the fountain, the lights, everything seemed to exist, but it was so unreal. Even the white figure became illusory. Only the silver sword light that filled the night sky and tore the whole sky was so clear. Between reality and illusion, there was only one sword, moving forward with indomitable will. No words could describe this sword. This sword appeared quickly and abruptly. The silver edge ran through heaven and earth, and Zhou Qianyan could not even judge the power of this sword. Under the huge threat of life, he instinctively grabbed Xianxia beside him and retreated at full speed. The silver edge became the only thing in the night. The silver light drew a straight line without any detour and rushed into the villa in an instant. Boom! The surging sword intent exploded amidst the flying dust and stones. Lights, blood, gravel, smoke, and the wreckage of cars and appliances were mixed together. The sword light turned into a wave of air that swept hundreds of meters around with the smoke and dust. Wherever the wave of air passed, the surrounding lawns and fountains were completely destroyed. In the sword intent that was hot but without fire, the original green manor turned into a desert in an instant. Countless corpses were torn into blood foam and flew out. Zhou Qianyan pulled Xianxia to watch this sword, and his face became completely distorted. The figure that rushed into the villa was covered with smoke and dust, blurred. But the clear footsteps accompanied by a loud heartbeat kept ringing in the smoke and dust. Who is it? Xianxia stared at the smoke and dust in front of him with a pale face. He swallowed and suddenly roared. The smoke and dust slowly flew into the night sky. The blood fell slowly to the ground with the stones. Wuxia's second manor became a ruin again and a desert at the same time. In the chaos, a snow-like white dress slowly walked out of the smoke and dust ruins. The clear and flat voice sounded in the night with the surging sword intent, echoing throughout the nearby world. Chapter 4:10. Zhongzhou State Li Tianlan. On this night the name seemed to echo over the whole Wuxia city. The voice was clear and bright, spreading in the air and deeply imprinted in everyone's heart. The blazing sword will dispelled the coldness of the night. Blood fell, dust rose into the air, and the sword chi surged in the air. Thus the rising dust turned into a storm, sweeping up the smell of blood and blowing through the entire manor. In the chaotic flying dust, that figure slowly walked out, appearing in everyone's line of sight. White clothes, silver sword. Through the dust, the figure in Zhou Qianyan's sight was blurred, but he could clearly feel the unparalleled sharpness of the other party. His facial muscles twitched and trembled, and for a moment he looked extremely complicated. He really didn't expect Li Tianlan to be here. He also didn't expect that after Sai City, the revenge of the Snowdance Corps would come so soon. He just saw the news. How long had it been since the entire Snowdance Corps arrived in Eastern Europe? Calculating the time, the other party killed him without hesitation as soon as he got out of the airport, without even a moment's delay. The other party was obviously prepared. Jiang Qinyan's eyes gradually became ferocious. If the surprise attack of the two highnesses of Sai City tonight was a slap in his face, then Li Tianlan's sword was the second consecutive slap. Situ Tsangyue and Situ Wanjie. The two invincible realm experts hadn't made a move in front of him, but now such a young junior directly killed him with a sword. If he still couldn't respond tonight, where was the face of the Jiang family of South America? A powerful country valued power. A wealthy family also valued power. Like the Wang family of Beihai, their power had lasted hundreds of years of invincibility and glory. The Jiang family of South America, on the other hand, had hundreds of years of cold-bloodedness and deceit. Jiang Qinyan suddenly laughed. His voice was so soft that it was almost a whisper, but the resentment and coldness in it came to his face. It was particularly cold. From any standpoint, Jiang Qinyan had a reason not to let Li Tianlan go. In the decisive Battle of Heaven Capital 3 years ago, the Jiang family of South America plotted against the Samsara Palace. Not only did they lose soldiers and generals, but even one of their hidden pawns in the killer world was killed by Li Tianlan. Xianxia. In the final Battle of Heaven Capital, it should have been his most glorious stage, and it was also the glorious moment of the Jiang family of South America's invincible family. As a result, evil died and the Jiang family of South America's plan failed. Qin Weibai, on the other hand, was a woman that Jiang Qinyan truly appreciated and even loved. But his goddess had belonged to Li Tianlan a few years ago. As for tonight, Li Tianlan once again made him lose face. New enmity, old enmity. Jiang Qinyan's killing intent rose to its peak in an instant. The new highness of Zhongzhou State, a 22-year-old with the combat capability of the invincible realm. Li Tianlan was very strong and his martial arts were very special. But no matter how strong and special he was, he only had the combat capability of the invincible realm, not even the real invincible realm. This kind of strength was quite good in the entire dark world. But was this the reason why Li Tianlan kept coming to get revenge on him? Jiang Qinyan really laughed. He was angry, but at the same time he found it extremely ridiculous. Today, Jiang Qinyan seemed to want to say something. But Li Tianlan did not give him any chance at all. All the grudges were laid out there for everyone to see. The vows were still vivid and everyone could hear them. Li Tianlan gave his name. Now that he could do it, why talk nonsense? The sword intent was hot and ethereal. The silver edge of the sword shone with a sharp light. Li Tianlan raised falling stars in his hand for a moment. The smoke-filled night sky seemed to suddenly change. From illusion to reality. In an instant the sword energy soared into the sky. The violent sword intent centered on Li Tianlan suddenly burst out in a continuous stream. The sword was not condensed, but it directly covered the whole place. Jiang Qinyan's expression suddenly changed and he said angrily, "How dare you?" His roar rang out in the sword intent but then disappeared. Jiang Qinyan put down Shenker Rekvia beside him and pounced directly on Li Tianlan. He saw the purpose of the sword. Although the sword covered Jiang Qinyan, most of the sword energy was spreading toward the surrounding elites of the Jiang family of South America. Jiang Qinyan's figure passed through the sword intent in a rage. Almost in the blink of an eye, he had appeared in front of Li Tianlan. The sword intent spread out in the blade of falling stars. Li Tianlan suddenly laughed and his figure suddenly disappeared from Jiang Qinyan's sight. At the same time, in Reki City, outside a luxuriously decorated resort in the west of the city, two exceptionally charming middle-aged men and women were standing in front of the door, quietly watching the lights in the resort. The interior of the originally extremely relaxing resort was now filled with a tense atmosphere. Under the lights, this area was completely in a state of alert, as if it was facing a great enemy. Even the burly security guards in the resort were solemn and respectful. Look at the situation. The Jiang family is making a lot of noise in Eastern Europe. If it weren't for the low temperature, I would have thought we were in South America. The middle-aged man with a long sword on his back squinted at the lights in his line of sight and chuckled. This was a man who looked very good when he smiled. His facial features were handsome and gentle, and even his eyes seemed to be emitting a strong smile. Me. The man looked at the woman beside him and smiled. Or you. I'm in a hurry. The woman said in a flat tone. No need. Before the man's smiling voice fell, the woman beside him had suddenly disappeared. The next moment, the woman's figure appeared directly over the resort. The air over the resort suddenly twisted. The airflow roared wildly. In the almost violent momentum, the sword intent continued to hover all the way up. A vortex with a radius of hundreds of meters suddenly appeared in the dark night. Let's hurry. Only then did the man's voice fall completely. The resort's security guards had noticed the abnormality of the man and the woman. A pair of security guards came over cautiously. Suddenly they saw the woman disappear and subconsciously froze. The night in the resort seemed to be getting darker. The smiling man's whole body had been completely infected by darkness. So in the security guard's sight, even the man's body disappeared. Only a kind reminder sounded in their ears. The wind is rising. The wind suddenly rose over the resort. Eastern Europe, which was already cold, seemed to cool down suddenly. The huge whirlpool in the air was still spinning, but it was no longer tangible and intangible. The entire whirlpool began to freeze in an extremely short period of time. The frost filled the air and quickly melted. Amidst the strong winds, heavy rain appeared above the resort. The fierce wind and heavy rain swept down without warning. The heavy rain was like a sword. The raindrops fell, but they did not hit the ground. Instead, they hit everything unscrupulously as the wind blew. The sword-like rain refracted shadows all over the sky in the night. For a time, the whole resort was full of sword-like rain whistling. There was chaos in the resort, and the strong fire rose in the heavy rain. Before the elites of the Jiang family of South America stationed here had time to gather, the darkness had quietly enveloped the light and filled the entire manor. The sword-like rain fell more wildly in the darkness, and shrill screams rang out continuously. In the deep darkness, the fire occasionally lit up for a moment and then went out completely. Only the blue lightning of the thunder-shocking realm could maintain its own light in the darkness. But somehow, the moment a few thunder-shocking realm experts held up the light quickly disappeared in the darkness. The experts of the fire-flaming realm of the Jiang family of South America began to gather. More than a dozen experts of the fire-flaming realm gathered together. The moment the fire broke through the darkness, the dazzling light came instantly with terrifying heat. Light and darkness alternated repeatedly. In the extreme light changes, everyone in the Jiang family of South America was in chaos. Light and darkness were intertwined and perfectly integrated with the heavy rain all over the sky, turning into a storm mixed with several kinds of sword intents. The storm almost flattened the whole resort. In the shadow of death and shrill screams, a male voice with a smile sounded in the air, gentle and kind. Snowdance Corps Han Chongyang Yun Qinshi send you on your way. Han Chongyang liked to talk. On this occasion he knew that his second senior sister would not speak, so he simply said it for her. The heavy rain and the light blended completely. Phantom sword, intangible phantom of Mount Shu. Yin and Yang sword, Yin and Yang formless of Mount Shu. The sword energy blended together and spread wildly in the center of the resort. From beginning to end, no thunder-shocking realm expert of the Jiang family of South America took action. In the war in the Dark World, the number of people was indeed an advantage. But to exert this advantage, the experts in their own camp also needed to temporarily contain the enemy. No thunder-shocking realm expert of the Jiang family of South America took action. A group of elites of the fire-flaming realm and the ice-condensing realm faced the sword-intense of two half-step invincible realm experts without any preparation. In the messy scene, it was almost a complete massacre. In the extremely chaotic scene, a horrified voice suddenly sounded. Mr. Jiang Yunxi was killed. Mr. Dark Knight is dead. Mr. Tong is dead. Horrified voices rang out one after another. Jiang Yunxi, Dark Knight, Mr. Tong. They were the three thunder-shocking realm experts stationed in the resort. One was at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm, and the other two were at the stabilization phase of the thunder-shocking realm. Not only them, but in the resort, some experts at the peak of the fire-flaming realm also died silently in the chaos. Yin-yang sword intense and phantom sword intense were very strong. But the two kinds of sword intense blended, and it was absolutely impossible to wipe out these experts at the peak of the thundershocking realm and the fire-flaming realm so easily. After losing these experts, the elites of the Jiang family of South America in the resort had no room to resist in the face of the horrible sword intent falling from the sky. There are assassins. The sword intent was flying and spreading. The blade in the dark seemed to be assassinating the fewer and fewer experts of the Jiang family of South America one by one. The chaotic camp completely collapsed, and the elites of the Jiang family of South America began to flee in all directions. As if to match the words of Han Chongyang, the phantom sword master, another clear and polite voice sounded in the night. But in the ears of the elites of the Jiang family of South America, it was like a demon's whisper. Cool breeze and drifting cloud of Sai City send you on your way. This is the first half of the chapter. I can't write anymore. I have a terrible headache and feel dizzy. I can't continue to write well. If I can't write well, I'd better write less. Chapter 4:11. Late at night on August 7th. In the darkest night before dawn, when everyone was still thinking about what would happen when the Snowdance Corps entered Eastern Europe, Reki City, the capital of Wulan State, had completely fallen into chaos that had not been seen in decades. A large number of elites of the Jiang family of South America were stationed here. So the strongest experts of the Snowdance Corps also appeared here. No one had expected that Zhou State would act so quickly and without warning. A few hours ago, Eastern Europe was still a stagnant water with only occasional storms. With the arrival of the Snowdance Corps, the wind had not risen and the clouds had not surged. In the calm without wind and waves, in an instant, the heavy rain was majestic, abrupt, violent, sharp and ruthless. The revenge came so quickly and without warning. The list of high-level members of the Snowdance Corps was not a secret to the dark forces. So as soon as the Snowdance Corps appeared in Im, some major forces in Eastern Europe had noticed that the Snowdance Corps was missing several heavyweights. But Li Tianlan appeared in front of everyone. So no one would think much about it. So when everyone felt that something was wrong but could not tell what was wrong, the Snowdance Corps' most ruthless revenge against the Jiang family of South America began directly in Reki City. Li Tianlan was moving. Cool breeze and drifting cloud were moving. The Yin and Yang phantom was moving. In a military base in the east of Reki City, the Jiang family of South America was also moving. The Jiang family of South America had stationed nearly 800 elites in the east, west, south and north of Reki City, but 3 sides were attacked tonight. When he received the signal for help from the resort in the west of the city, Xianxia, the person in charge of the east of the city of the Jiang family of South America, began to gather people for rescue without hesitation. Xianxia was in his 40s. He had no code name and was not famous in the dark world. But as an expert cultivated internally by the Jiang family of South America, his status in the Jiang family of South America was not low at all. In terms of blood relationship, he was the cousin of Jiang Qiansong, the patriarch of the Jiang family. Such a relationship was closer than the relationship between Jiang Qiansong and Jiang Qianyan. He was a real direct descendant. This time, the Jiang family of South America sent nearly 2,000 elites into Eastern Europe, which could be regarded as the vanguard force to open up the situation in Eastern Europe. If Jiang Qianyan was the well-deserved #1 figure in this force, Xianxia was the second in command of this vanguard force. His strength was not strong or weak in the ranks of the half-step invincible realm, but he was absolutely difficult to deal with. His combat capability was not outstanding, but he was a master who was good at defense. This was also the reason why Xianxia still dared to go over to help when he knew that the experts of Zhou State who raided the west of the city were Cool Breeze, Drifting Cloud and Yin and Yang Phantom. Naturally, he was no match for the 4 of them. Even defending himself was difficult. But at this moment, the 200 elites stationed in the military base in the east of the city with him were the most elite 200 people that the Jiang family of South America had invested in Eastern Europe. With such a lineup, even if they could not win, they could at least delay the 4 from Zhou State. Reki City was the base camp of the Rekvia family. The cooperation between Rekvia and the Jiang family of South America had always been close. So at this time, Reki City was also the base camp of the Jiang family of South America. The chaotic city was like a net at this time. The Jiang family of South America stood on the top of the net and could see the whole situation clearly. The 2 highnesses of Sai City had left. Li Tianlan, the commander of the Snowdance Corps, was holding up Jiang Qinyan recklessly. Cool breeze and drifting cloud. Phantom Yin Yang. Two top assassins whose deterrent power was no less than that of the half-step invincible realm, plus two half-step invincible realm sword masters of Mount Shu in Zhou State, were slaughtering other elites of the Jiang family of South America stationed in Reki City. Everything was crystal clear. Jiang Xiu knew Jiang Qinyan's strength very well. In this year's holy list, Jiang Qinyan ranked 5th. With his strength, if he went all out, it would take him no more than 20 minutes to kill a young man in the invincible realm. The distance between the east and the west of the city was slightly closer than the distance between Jiang Qinyan and the west of the city, about 10 minutes. That was to say, as long as his side stalled the 4 experts of Zhou State for half an hour, Jiang Qinyan, who had killed Li Tianlan, would rush to the west of the city. At that time, the 4 masters of the Snowdance Corps of Zhou State would face the invincible power of the Jiang family of South America. Jiang Xiu sorted out his thoughts. When the elites of the Jiang family of South America gathered, his smile was a little twisted. The Snowdance Corps acted decisively and ruthlessly. The revenge came quickly. First it was Sai City, then the Snowdance Corps. 2 consecutive slaps in the face, crisp and loud. But it was not over. If the commander of the Snowdance Corps and the 2 deputy marshals all died here tonight, who would be slapped in the face by all this? He considered all the possible variables and suddenly said, "Come on. Go and get General Criso." Criso was the highest officer of the military base called Flying Bird. He was an old general in his 50s. He was old but firm, and he was a confidant of the Rekvia family. Although Wulan State had a land area second only to snow country in Europe, its military was relatively chaotic, especially the setting of some sensitive departments, which made people feel that it was neither fish nor fowl. The Flying Bird military base was stationed on the outskirts of the capital. Its duties were similar to those of the garrison of Zhou State, but the duties on the surface were somewhat vague. Anyway, the Flying Bird military base was stationed in the Wulan State. They could be said to be the most elite army in Wulan State. Tonight, if they could join hands with the Fanio base, the strength of the military would be enough to suppress most variables. In the case that the Snowdance Corps only aimed at the Jiang family of South America, it was difficult for Wulan State to send troops. But General Criso was a confidant of the Rekvia family. In this country where the army headquarters was full of too many inside stories, as long as General Criso nodded, the army of the Flying Bird base could rush into every corner of Reki City in the fastest time. General Criso did not need to be invited at all. However, before Jiang Xiu could leave his line of sight, an old general in a military uniform with grizzled hair walked over with large strides. The Jiang family of South America was directly stationed in the military base of Wulan State, which was enough to show the close relationship between the Jiang family of South America and the Rekvia family. At this time, the Jiang family of South America was attacked, and the Rekvia family naturally had no reason to remain silent. Therefore, for the sake of the 2 million euros that the Rekvia family had just transferred to his account, the old general, who had less than 2 years left in his term, faced Jiang Xiu and went straight to the point. "Mr. Jiang, if the Jiang family needs help, the Flying Bird Corps is willing to provide military support." Military support and firepower support were sometimes 2 different concepts. At least in this case it was a different concept. At the moment when the threat was not big enough to threaten the life and death of his country, no general dared to order artillery to bombard his capital. Even if the general wanted to go crazy, the 2 million euros that Rekvia had just transferred to his account was not enough to support his fantasy. So military support was at most human support. "That's great." Jiang Xiu laughed happily. He had an ordinary appearance and his eyes were a little small. When he laughed, his eyes almost became a slit, but the looming sharpness came out from his narrowed eyes. He looked at the old general's military uniform and whispered, "It's just your clothes. This is our own country and our soldiers have the right to wear military uniforms." General Criso's expression was serious and dignified. "At present, a group of thugs has brought a great threat to the security of Reki City. Mr. Schenker of the Rekvia family believes that our army should appear at this time, so as to enhance the confidence of the people." This was undoubtedly a bunch of nonsense that sounded a little interesting, but in fact it was meaningless. However, Jiang Xiu listened with relish. When the old general's voice fell, he finally couldn't help laughing and even made a military salute of Wulan State. I admire the bravery of your military. This is something that many governments lack. The elites of the Jiang family of South America had gathered. More than a dozen military trucks rumbled over. In the night, the lights of the trucks were on. The bright lampposts passed through the darkness and illuminated the darkest night before dawn. It's my duty, General Criso said calmly and then waved his hand. The elites of the Jiang family of South America and the elites of the Flying Bird base began to act at the same time. The swift and vigorous crowd rushed into the trucks one by one. The old general made an inviting gesture. Jiang Xiu shrugged and followed him into the truck at the very front. The general drove in person. The charging march of Wulan State sounded in the base. In the passionate music, more than a dozen trucks full of combatants roared out of the Flying Bird base in the night. Money was a kind of power. Especially the euro. This power inspired General Criso's infinite pride. In the roar of the engine he seemed to think of the countless extraordinary years in his military career. His face was solemn and serious. The truck rushed forward under his control. Turn left. Outside the Flying Bird base was a narrow, flat path with an obvious slope. This kind of road was built outside the military base. Although it was a little inappropriate, it did have extraordinary military significance. More than a dozen trucks swooped down from a high place under the leadership of the old general, getting faster and faster. From a distance, they looked like a group of mad cows rushing down the hillside in the night. The lower the truck went, the steeper the slope became. The lights illuminated the flat road in the distance. In the truck, the general was talking to Jiang Xiu about the heroic deeds in his military career in high spirits. Wulan State had a land area second only to Snow Country in Europe, but it had been in constant turmoil in history. The financial order was chaotic and the military and political systems were in disarray. There were some problems that were not fatal but could not be ignored. In a sense, the Rekvia family, which was based in Wulan State, was listed as one of the top 4 wealthy families in Eastern Europe, but it was not a top wealthy family in the whole of Europe, which had something to do with the overall environment of Wulan State. In such a country where even the establishment of the special warfare system was controversial, the power and blame of soldiers, especially senior soldiers, were somewhat vague. Criso was an old general, so he had a lot of achievements to show off. Jiang Xiu listened very respectfully and occasionally echoed a few words, but he had begun to outline the plan after tonight in his mind. The 2 highnesses of Sai City had left. Tonight, although their side was caught off guard by Li Tianlan, after they reacted, there was almost no possibility of failure with their strength. Did this mean that the Jiang family of South America could restart their plan to plot against the Samsara Palace 3 years ago? The current Samsara Palace had shrunk a lot compared with 3 years ago, but Li Tianlan's status was also extraordinary. If they controlled Li Tianlan, not only would Qin Weibai be in the Jiang family's pocket, but the remaining power of the Samsara Palace would also join in. Moreover, they could also take back the murderous weapon, the Legend of Qin, which they had lost 3 years ago, and even Blue Sky Underworld. They could also indirectly influence Zhongzhou State. In the dim car, Jiang Xiu's pupils gradually glowed. Criso drove and Jiang Xiu sat. One was recalling the past. The other was looking forward to the future. In a trance, a somewhat thin figure seemed to appear on the path that was about to reach the end. The truck was very tall. The figure was thin and dry, standing in the middle of the road, lonely like a blade of grass. Jiang Xiu glanced at it casually and was about to ignore it when he suddenly realized that there was indeed a person standing there. His line of sight suddenly focused. In his sight, it seemed to be an old man with sparse gray hair and a stooped body. It was a very humble posture, but as the truck swooped over, he tilted his head slightly and frowned. An indescribable sharpness and violence came over in an instant and almost filled the entire car for a moment. The truck rolled over. Jiang Xiu saw the old man's face. It was a face that was a little weathered but very strange. Jiang Xiu frowned and didn't have time to speak. Creak. The harsh sound of brakes rang out in an instant. The path was steep. With the braking ability of the truck, such a brake was simply a disaster. But Criso didn't seem to realize this. He stared at the old man in the middle of the road, his pupils dilated, and his ruddy face, which had been stimulated by the lofty sentiments in his heart, gradually lost its luster, became pale and then deathly pale. The galloping truck barely stopped less than 20 meters away from the old man, and the glaring light shone on the old man's face. But the brakes in the back were too late to react, and one after another crashed into each other. The light trembled in the collision and a dull loud roar sounded. General Creso's body also began to tremble. #% and asterisk. Asterisk. The general opened his mouth, but only a very vague and unclear syllable came out of his mouth. His expression was extremely complicated, but it eventually turned into pure fear. At this moment the old general suddenly thought of an Eastern noun. Karma. He felt that he had really received his retribution. Just 5 minutes ago he was sitting in the truck and talking to Xianxia about his great achievements many years ago. In his boasting he talked about the Arctic Ocean Command in Zhou State and how he stood his ground against the opinions of the masses when the Arctic Ocean Command planned to station troops in Wulan State. He even went to war with Zhou State and defeated the Li family, which was at the height of its power at that time. Xianxia did not refute this. He knew very well why the Arctic Ocean Command did not set up a garrison base in Wulan State. It was entirely because of the opposition of Snow Country and many European powers, and it had nothing to do with Wulan State. However, Creso was very happy as he spoke. When he was boasting about this, he never thought that he would meet the protagonist who led the army of Zhou State to march into Wulan State a few minutes later. When the Arctic Ocean Command was established more than 20 years ago, it was the two highnesses of the Li family who were at the height of their power in Zhou State, who went to Eastern Europe together. That was the confrontation between the Li family and the major forces and the major European powers. There were wars and games in such confrontations. In the war of that year, in addition to the two highnesses of the Li family, there were also some equally dazzling figures. And the person who appeared in front of him at this time could barely be regarded as one of the protagonists who had established the foundation of the Arctic Ocean Command. He had set out from Im with 600 elites of the Li family in a day and a night. Along the way he had cut through the borders of 3 countries, repelled the obstruction of several superpowers, crossed a distance of hundreds of kilometers and directly attacked Wulan State. When countless experts in the fire-flaming realm, the thunder-shocking realm, and even the half-step invincible realm turned into a rain of blood in front of him, the 600 elites were like an unstoppable wildfire that could almost sweep the entire Wulan State. At that time General Creso was still very young and so was the person in front of him. After many years, General Creso almost thought that he was hallucinating when he saw him again. His face had already changed a bit. He looked older and more exhausted and his body was no longer as straight as before. However, as his killing intent rose up, a familiar feeling washed over him, as if everything that had just happened seemed like it had happened yesterday. In front of the vehicle a person blocked the whole road. The old man frowned and looked at the motorcade in front of him. He didn't feel familiar with everything in front of him, nor did he sigh with emotion. The killing intent kept rising in him, getting stronger and stronger. All of his essence, chi and spirit seemed to have reached the peak state in an instant. Creso's body trembled violently. Instinctively he scrambled out of the truck and ran back. The huge volume caused by the thunder-shocking realm expert resounded through the night sky. The order was simple and straightforward. Flying Bird Corps retreat. Retreat. The shrill voice spread out in the night. In the chaos the old man seemed to take a step forward. He still did not recognize the old general who was prominent in Wulan State. He did not have any feelings of revisiting this city again. He didn't like it back then. Eastern Europe was too cold. It was so cold that there was no mortal world. When he took a deep breath it seemed to be the smell of glaciers. Now that he came here again he didn't like it either and he was a little uncomfortable. All these years he had been in the desert. The desert was too hot. Eastern Europe was too cold. Neither of them was a good place. The old man's palm was burning. The orange fire was extremely hot, dispelling the chill. The flame rose and the color gradually turned blue. Then it turned blazing white again. The color changed again but the fire never changed. Flying Bird Corps, retreat, retreat. That's fire, man. The old general's hoarse roar reverberated incessantly. Xianxia frowned. He felt that the name Fireman was a little familiar, but he couldn't remember it. But he didn't intend to be merciful to this guy who dared to block his way. He controlled Li Tianlan. The Jiang family of South America had a very brilliant future again. Xianxia was sure to win. At this moment no matter who stood in front of him he would crush them. Xianxia's face twisted for a moment, and he jumped directly from the passenger seat to the driver's seat. Countless violent thunderbolts surged around him and rushed out of the car. The air was twisted and pushed forward under the thunderbolts. Boom! Under the huge force, the truck at the front suddenly flew up completely. The huge force drove more than a dozen trucks up. The truck convoy was like a mad cow, condescending and desperate to crush the old man. Fireman. No matter who he was, he had to die. The flames in Fireman's hands changed from pale white to orange again. Countless trucks soared into the sky under the influence of the lightning and smashed down violently. It was as if they had filled the night sky one after another. It was a terrifying sight. The distance between the two sides was 20 meters and they were almost reached in an instant. 15 meters. Fireman raised his hands. 10 meters. The fire was in Fireman's single hand. 5 meters. The killing intent in Xianxia's eyes burst out completely. In his sight, the short old man lowered his body again and punched the ground. Boom. Under the deep night, the darkness within hundreds of meters disappeared in an instant. The entire Fanio base shook like never before. The existence of the night had lost its meaning. Fire. Fire was everywhere. The fire filled the ground, filled the air and rolled into the sky. The immeasurable raging fire rose against the trend like a tsunami, and the flat path was completely lifted up by this punch. The whole road flew up. Sand, stones, trees, everything turned into a raging fire that condensed into substance. The raging fire surged like stormy waves beating the shore. One by one, the trucks that swooped down were completely swept away by the punch, exploded in the air and turned into fireballs one after another. A large number of corpses burned for a moment in the fire. Under the blazing temperature, all the flesh and bones were burned into ashes. The ashes fluttered in the night and it was hazy. The trucks disappeared. A large number of elites and troops also disappeared completely. With Fireman as the center, the whole road had completely disappeared. A huge pit with a radius of hundreds of meters and a depth of tens of meters lay between Fireman and the Fanio base, becoming an impassable gap. The fire under the night sky began to fade. The night reappeared in the sky. The fire in the Fanio base was raging, and the burning ashes were sprinkled in the sky. The thick and white gray was like a mist. Fireman stood in front of the fire, looking at the light in front of him with a calm face. Only the fire was burning and it seemed to never go out. This was a punch that he had been silent for many years. A punch at the peak. A punch that shocked the sky. This chapter and yesterday's chapter were originally one chapter. Put them together, they are not weak. But yesterday I really had a headache and felt uncomfortable, so I published it in 2 chapters. I can't afford to get hurt if I don't save the manuscript. Chapter 4:12. The ethereal but very real sword intent was still surging in the ruins of the manor. In the laughter, Li Tianlan's figure had completely disappeared in front of Zhou Xian. Without any sign of exerting force, as if he had just turned around, his figure had lost all traces. Only the sword intent was still condensing in all directions, endlessly growing. Zhou Qianyan's figure abruptly stopped in front of Li Tianlan. His figure stopped, but the surrounding space suddenly began to twist and shatter. The void domain continued to extend. The ruins suddenly quieted down. The ruins disappeared, the smoke disappeared, and in the extreme silence, only the horrible darkness spread silently. But Zhou Qianyan still did not perceive Li Tianlan. He frowned tightly and suddenly thought of a person, or rather a piece of equipment. 4 Spirits Armor, Azure Dragon of Zhongzhou State. For many years, the special warfare system of Zhongzhou State had gone through countless battles and finally created the 4 Spirits Armor, which was famous in the Dark World, for the 4 Spirits Generals of the Terracotta Army. The most important material of the 4 Spirits Armor was cloud silk, which was priceless in the Dark World. The value of cloud silk was not only its warmth in winter and coolness in summer, but also its extraordinary defensive power. Could absorb nearly half of the attack of an ordinary thundershocking realm expert. This meant that most of the attack power of a fire-flaming realm expert would be absorbed by cloud silk, and even a little of the power of an invincible realm expert would be absorbed. A little was very little. But in the battle of the invincible realm, a little of it might determine the ranking of the divine and holy lists, or even life and death. In the Dark World, top inheritance, special physique and suitable martial arts were all conditions for people to defeat enemies of a higher realm under normal circumstances. Similarly, there was hardware in the Dark World that could improve people's strength. The most famous was the famous 12 murderous weapons in the Dark World. Any murderous weapon could almost have the deterrent power equivalent to that of an invincible realm expert. Below the murderous weapons, treasures like cloud silk were also hardware to improve strength. Li Tianlan had a cloud silk shirt given to him by Samsara Palace. This was no secret. It was also no secret what the function of Azure Dragon armor of Zhongzhou State's 4 spirits armor was. Azure Dragon General Gong Sun Qi's Azure Dragon armor was improved by the Dongqing clan, and it used a technical concept that the Dongqing clan was still ahead of the world in terms of military affairs. The most advanced optical camouflage technology. Gong Sun Qi was very strong. As the #1 person under the invincible realm who was recognized by many in the Dark World, he could find his position even in the Holy List when he put on the Azure Dragon armor. He might not win against an invincible realm expert, but he was absolutely invincible. Optical camouflage. As long as there was light, he could disappear into any corner without leaving a trace. This was the technology of the Dongqing clan. The relationship between Li Tianlan and the Dongqing clan was also no secret. The Dongqing clan repaired the damaged cloud silk robe in the shortest time and used their optical camouflage technology. What Li Tianlan was wearing was almost another 4 spirits armor. A touch of seriousness finally appeared in Jiang Qinyan's angry and cold eyes. Gong Sun Qi was known as the first person under the invincible realm. He was the strongest among all the superiors of the half-step invincible realm. And the top superiors of the half-step invincible realm had the so-called combat capability of the invincible realm. Li Tianlan might be a little worse than Gong Sun Qi, but he himself had the combat capability of the invincible realm. After putting on that damn robe, it was enough for Jiang Qinyan to pay attention to his existence. The void was still slowly spreading around Jiang Qinyan. The void domain of the invincible realm was dark and silent. But the domain of the superiors on the holy list still had light. The light was always there, whether it was light or dark. Where there was light, optical camouflage could disappear in any corner without a sound. The void domain kept spreading. Jiang Qinyan's eyes suddenly turned cold. Suddenly, a gust of wind appeared in the pitch-black and silent void. The gust of wind swept every corner of the void domain, and the cold airflow stirred the silent void. The whole domain suddenly fluctuated like a curtain. Jiang Qinyan perceived everything around him with no expression on his face. His will had been completely condensed to the peak, so the gust of wind in the void was getting stronger and stronger, and it had become a storm that almost rushed out of the domain. The domain of hundreds of meters became more and more manic under his control. In the constantly undulating darkness, Jiang Qinyan finally noticed a blurry, almost unnoticeable white shadow in front of him. The light flowed subtly on the white shadow. The clothes of concealment. An illusory person. Die. Jiang Qinyan stepped down and swung his fist straight up. Boom. A horrible sound suddenly exploded in the dark domain. The domain shrank wildly, and the void of 100 meters was condensed into a fist by Jiang Qinyan. The horrible killing intent rose into the sky. Jiang Qinyan's body rushed forward, and in the fist condensed with darkness, like a goshawk seeing its prey, he swooped down with all his strength. The wildly shrinking domain became darker. Under the shroud of darkness, the disappearing white figure finally became obvious and began to become clear. Li Tianlan raised his hand. Jiang Qinyan had realized in an instant that something was wrong. The white clothes in front of him were lifelike. But he had no weapon in his hand. When he saw this clearly, his body had rushed close. The loud sound of the void condensing and exploding began to dissipate. Jiang Qinyan's fist was already full of darkness as deep as ink. In silence, white shadows appeared in front of Jiang Qinyan one after another. They were all Li Tianlan. Lifelike Li Tianlan. It seemed that dozens of white shadows appeared at the same time, and then countless white shadows gathered together wildly and finally became 3 shadows. The 3 shadows surrounded Jiang Qinyan in the center in a triangle. The shadows raised their arms. None of them had weapons in their hands. Jiang Qinyan suddenly looked back. In the domain behind him, Li Tianlan stepped out of the darkness. He raised his long sword. The 3 shadows around Jiang Qinyan completely copied Li Tianlan's movements and raised their arms. In the silent and dark void domain, sword energy suddenly soared. Like a storm rushing into an empty room, the violent sword energy suddenly filled every corner of the dark domain. The sword intent was so mighty, so continuous, so majestic, so condensed. There was no shadow around Li Tianlan in the void domain. But 3 shadows had appeared around Zhou Xian. 4 white figures like 4 lighthouses in the dark, lit up the darkness and guided the way of the sword energy all over the sky. Shadow formula. It was Tribulation's shadow formula. But now it could also be regarded as Li Tianlan's own shadow formula. The 4 white shadows connected the sword energy that filled the whole domain. The shadows and the real body seemed to be connected in a trance. Ferocious, swift, strange, yet exquisite. Everything happened in the blink of an eye. Zhou Xian attacked. He looked back instantly. Li Tianlan's offensive had covered the whole domain in an instant. In the dark domain, the sword energy around the 3 shadows roared wildly. With Li Tianlan's real body as the end and the shadows as the front, the sword energy all over the sky directly condensed into a vast sword that ran through the whole domain. The giant sword was fierce and fierce, spinning in the darkness. The whole domain began to twist and shake with the rotation of the giant sword. The rotating sword edge, like a collapsing pillar, directly covered Zhou Xian. The sword intent coexisted with the darkness. Zhou Xian stood in his own invincible domain, but he was cut by the opponent's sword intent all over the sky and bled. There were 2 roads to the invincible domain. One was like Kunlun City, the Jiang family of South America, and many superpowers in the West. They all created domains with their bodies and swallowed the sword intent with their domains. The other was like the Wang family of Beihai, the Li family, the Jifeng sword reigning school, and the Purgatory of Heaven capital. They followed the path of turning oneself into a sword and breaking the domain. Simply put, the former pursued a great ability to contain and control. The latter, on the other hand, pursued absolute destructive power. Zhou Xian was very confident in his invincible domain. But when his domain failed to restrain Li Tianlan well, he recognized the fact. He underestimated the young man after all. The sword energy all over the sky fell like a rainstorm. The rotating giant sword had reached Zhou Xian's head. Feeling the almost suffocating coldness, Zhou Xian's eyes were cold. The white shadow was still maintaining the sword intent around him. Li Tianlan's figure flickered and returned to the darkness again. Zhou Xian's expression changed. Without hesitation, he suddenly raised his palm and punched the void. This was his domain. It was his void. It was made by him and could also be destroyed by him. The whole dark space suddenly paused in silence for a moment. The vast and distant darkness was completely torn apart in an instant. The domain that covered hundreds of meters of space exploded completely. Darkness and sword energy broke out at the same time. The 2 forces were entangled and colliding. In the ruins that restored the night, the sword intent and darkness intertwined and light emerged. 2 streaks of blood appeared in the chaotic ruins. Zhou Xian fell from midair and stood on the ground. He bent down subconsciously and swallowed the blood gushing from his throat. In the corner of his eyes, Li Tianlan's white clothes had been completely stained with blood. His figure fell to the ground, staggered back, and then disappeared into the night again. Anger, coldness, resentment, and jealousy. All the negative emotions disappeared completely in Zhou Xian's eyes. His eyes were black and white. In his clear and indifferent eyes, there was only killing intent shining in his pupils. The most naked killing intent. Covered in blood, he punched again. It was still a clear and powerful fist. His movements were firm and steady. After realizing Li Tianlan's strength, Zhou Xian no longer held back. This was his first battle since he entered Eastern Europe. His opponent was a junior. It was disgraceful, but as long as he could kill him, everything was absolutely worth it. His body leaned forward slightly with the outstretched fist. Their tightly clasped arms splattered sparkling blood in the night. Zhou Xian's eyes were full of killing intent. Under the killing intent there was concentration. The punch seemed slow. But it couldn't be stopped. The punch went forward. However, the entire space was swept back along with his punch. In all directions, east, west, north, and south. All the surrounding space seemed to be completely imprisoned by the punch and moved closer to him. The space was not in the dark. Instead, it became a blur of color. Only the fist seemed to be slowly enlarging in the shrinking space in a trance, as if filling the whole world. The most powerful unique technique of the Jiang family of South America. 30-meter mortal world. The evaluation of this unique technique in the dark world might not be as good as that of the 10th unique domain. But its talent was no less than that of any unique technique. In the dark world, when all the domains of the invincible realm focused on expansion, only the 30-meter mortal world pursued shrinking. It shrank smaller and smaller. Zhang Qiansong, the patriarch of the Jiang family of South America, performed the 30-meter mortal world. Although the domain around him was not really 30 meters, it was infinitely close. In the domain of 30 meters, Zhang Qiansong came and went with power comparable to that of a god. Jiang Qianyan couldn't do this, but he could barely shrink the domain to about 60 meters. In the domain of 60 meters, a full blow of the invincible realm was enough to destroy everything. This was the true meaning of the 30-meter mortal world. When the domain shrank, the force of a full blow would be greater. A huge force gathered in all directions. Jiang Qianyan's fist was still stretching forward. In a misty luster, Li Tianlan's figure appeared most clearly in the 30-meter mortal world. The domain kept shrinking. 150 meters. 100 meters. 80 meters. In his sight, Jiang Qianyan's fist seemed to become very big. But it was all an illusion because of the huge power of the punch. Li Tianlan's figure gradually became difficult. Under this punch, his figure was limited and he couldn't get away at all. Li Tianlan didn't want to go either. The domain of the 30-meter mortal world forcibly controlled his body and seemed to collide with Jiang Qianyan's fist. Li Tianlan looked up. His eyes shone brightly. He raised the blade of falling stars in his hand. In the overwhelming pressure, a clear whistle that could pierce through gold and crack stones sounded in the misty domain. The pressure from all sides pressed on. Li Tianlan didn't retreat half a step. He raised the sword. Charge. No words could describe Li Tianlan's decisiveness at this moment. The silver blade rose with his body. The sword intent all over the sky was released and crushed by the domain of the 30-meter mortal world. But he still held the sword. The sword intent disappeared. But his whole person had become one with the falling stars, shining with sharper and sharper light. His figure rushed into the air and rushed to Jiang Qiansong. A sword stabbed straight. This sword was not the most suitable for him, but it was not a perfect martial art. It belonged to the Li family. It belonged to the 24 moves of sword. 21st blade of shatter of land. The Li family's sword shattered the domain with sword energy. The shatter of land was the most aggressive sword move against the domain of the invincible realm. It went forward with indomitable will. The domain was still shrinking. 50 meters. The distance of 50 meters was extremely short. The white clothes and the silver sword seemed to be burning in the domain, triggering thunder. But in the end the sword was still the sword. With a silver light, the sword blade slammed into Jiang Qianyan. Jiang Qianyan held out his hand. The domain compressed wildly in front of him. A mass of air appeared in his hand. Falling stars stabbed the mass of air directly. Boom! The whole domain shook. Jiang Qianyan's face suddenly turned pale. Blood burst out of Li Tianlan's body. The mass of air that was condensed to the extreme dissipated wildly. Falling stars in Li Tianlan's hand gradually trembled, and the straight blade gradually bent. Jiang Qianyan's eyes flashed with coldness. Li Tianlan's eyes were still as bright as stars. In the process of falling stars bending, he suddenly laughed. The Li family practiced swordsmanship, which was known to the world. But it seemed that it had been too many years, so long that everyone had forgotten or rather neglected some things. The Li family originated from Zhuanyuantai. Zhuanyuantai originated from the Lin clan. The Lin clan originated from the ancestors of the Lin clan. But when the amazing ancestor created the 24 moves of sword, he used a set of punching techniques. Even if many people in the Li family had never practiced that set of punching techniques, neither did the Lin clan. That set of punching techniques was very powerful. But many of the most powerful unique skills were recorded in the Invincible Manual. For hundreds of years, except for that ancestor, Li Tianlan seemed to be the only one who had practiced the Invincible Manual. Falling stars bent to the limit, disappeared in an instant, and became the silver bracelet on Li Tianlan's wrist again. Li Tianlan was in the air. The misty darkness shrouded the domain of the night. His bones vibrated wildly and the sound was like a dragon's roar. The dragon's roar suddenly sounded, accompanied by raging fire and thunder, going straight into the sky. This was the predecessor of the 24 moves of sword. The 72 Styles of Dragon Fist of the Lin Clan and the Li Family. Dragon Fist, flying dragon in the sky. Raging fire and thunder expanded wildly in the domain, raging everything. In this late night in the misty domain. Reki City, Eastern Europe. The Li family, which had been silent for more than 20 years, seemed to shine again. The light burned on this young man who was only 22 years old, and turned into a flame that seemed to never go out. Chapter 4:13. No matter what it was, anything that could exist for a long time and be passed down was definitely a classic. It was the same for martial arts. The most classic, the most basic, the simplest, and also the strongest. Hundreds of years ago, before the Li family existed, the founder of Zhuanyuantai in Zhongzhou State was the ancestor of the Lin clan who could compete with the Chosen One. And what laid the foundation for Zhuanyuantai was the 72 Styles of Dragon Fist. Majestic, exquisite, strange, swift, fierce, feminine, all-encompassing. The ancestor of the Lin clan spent most of his life simplifying the 72 Styles of Dragon Fist into 24 moves of sword. It was the 24 moves of sword that had been circulating for hundreds of years and made the Lin clan and the Li family look down on the dark world for hundreds of years. Before the 24 moves of sword reached the advanced level, the unparalleled kung fu of that ancestor was able to compete with the heavenly suns was the Dragon Fist. The Lin clan lived in seclusion. The Li family was silent. For a long time, the glory of Zhuanyuantai had been dim for many years. The brilliance of the invincible manual in the record of war god of Zhuanyuantai would be completely extinguished. The dark world without the Li family was lonely. But after the loneliness one would eventually forget. That night. A very ordinary time, a very ordinary place. Just when everyone was about to forget the sharpness of the battle god catalog, accompanied by lightning and flames, the strongest martial path in the battle god catalog, the most ancient ultimate art, suddenly erupted with the most resplendent light. Dragon Fist, soaring dragon. In the domain of the 30-meter mortal world, Li Tianlan's body suddenly stretched out. Every bone and muscle in his body was madly vibrating the dual wind and thunder veins in his body. Thunderbolts and flames spread all over the domain with his body as the center. The raging fire kept burning, and the extremely dazzling blue thunderbolts raged in every corner of the domain. It was still inconvenient for Li Tianlan to move. But under the crazy vibration of the dual thunder veins, Li Tianlan's every move carried extreme strength and speed. The sword intent of the Shatter of Land had not dissipated, and the remaining sword intent was trying to support the domain. After the domain shrank, it began to expand toward the surroundings, covering a larger and larger area, while the air mass condensed on Jiang Qianyan's fist was getting smaller and smaller. Li Tianlan strode forward. The air mass in front of Jiang Qianyan swirled wildly, desperately suppressing Li Tianlan. The silent domain began to rumble. The void, which had comprehended the power of resistance, began to condense and become heavy. All the heaviness was pressed on Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan kept moving forward. The space in the domain turned into a hurricane that blew in the opposite direction. The hurricane grew stronger and stronger. Li Tianlan moved forward against the wind. His movements became slower and slower and the pressure on his body increased. Even his movements began to change. But his footsteps didn't stop at all. He carried the mountains, the sea and the whole world on his back. The cloud silk robe fluttered backward, and the robe behind him fluttered in a cold arc. Blood gushed out of Li Tianlan's body. The light on his body grew brighter and brighter. All the lightning was gathering towards him. In Jiang Qianyan's sight, Li Tianlan's figure spilled blood. Before the blood fell, his figure had completely disappeared. In front of him was a ball of light wrapped in lightning. The arcs of light were pulled out by the hurricane of the domain, forming patches after patches of light. However, he did not stop moving forward with great difficulty. The two of them were very close. Jiang Qianyan, with solemn and serious eyes, took a deep breath and shook his arms. In his hands, the majestic air mass rotated and turned into a huge vortex in the blink of an eye. Jiang Qianyan pushed the huge vortex forward one step. Li Tianlan's figure became clear without warning. The distance between the two had been reduced to less than 3 meters. At this distance, Jiang Qianyan could clearly see the wounds all over Li Tianlan's body. He could also see that the wounds on his body were constantly tearing and healing. Jiang Qianyan's pupils shrank sharply. In his sight, Li Tianlan's body was extremely clear. but he was missing an arm. His right hand was full of light. The purest, most dazzling and most violent light. It seemed that endless light gathered in his right hand, vast and majestic. In a trance, Jiang Qinyan only felt that the other party seemed to be holding a surging ocean in his hand. Li Tianlan raised his arm. In Jiang Qinyan's domain his movement seemed slow, but he couldn't be stopped at all. The vortex in front of Jiang Qinyan pushed him toward Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan didn't dodge at all. His right hand smashed down. With a punch condensed with light he smashed into the very center of the vortex. Crack. It seemed to be an extremely grand and absolutely light sound. Sounded like something was breaking. Everyone's eardrums hurt fiercely. Domain, thunder, flame, hurricane. Even Li Tianlan and Jiang Qinyan's bodies stopped abruptly. Outside the domain, both the remaining elites of the Jiang family of South America and the elites of the Rekvia family were desperately fleeing. The figures of Jiang Qinyan and Li Tianlan appeared in the night. That domain swallowed the night, almost solidifying. Everything in the domain seemed to be still. Li Tianlan's punch condensed with thunder passed through the center of the terrible vortex. The whole vortex turned blue in stillness. Li Tianlan's arm rushed in and collided with Jiang Qinyan's fist. The vortex was huge. So it looked like Li Tianlan's whole body rushed into the vortex. Crack. In the strange stillness centered on the domain, countless subtle sounds began to appear in all directions. The elites of the Jiang family of South America and Rekvia fled desperately. Cracks began to appear on the ground of ruins and corpses. The cracks spread in all directions and in the blink of an eye, they turned into bottomless ravines. The bright but misty domain of silence lit up for a moment. The whole domain fluctuated like water. In the domain Li Tianlan moved. The strange stillness suddenly turned into an absolute explosion. His whole body rushed directly into the vortex caused by Jiang Qinyan's all-out blow. The blue thunder and blood dyed the whole domain. Boom. In the loud noise that went straight into the sky, the whole vortex collapsed completely under Li Tianlan's impact. 30-meter mortal world, known as the strongest unique skill of the Jiang family of South America, began to break. The most thorough explosion. Countless misty lights flew in disorder. In the earth-shattering noise the domain was completely broken, and the huge force rushed out of the domain completely out of control. The huge force raged in the sky and on the ground. Within hundreds of meters the thick and hard earth was completely lifted up, and the deep surface turned into smoke and dust in the thunder and flames. As the burst domain blew into the distance, the ground of the whole manor kept crumbling and collapsing, or directly rushing into the sky. Li Tianlan was close to Jiang Qinyan. The ground was collapsing and sinking. Ruins and boulders rushed into the sky and smashed down. The sky was full of thunder and flames. In a scene like the end of the world, Li Tianlan was attacking desperately. Flying dragon was in the sky. Until the moment the domain broke, the dragon fist led by the huge force really went straight into the sky. The night was not dark. There was dazzling light everywhere. Thunder and fire kept gathering behind Li Tianlan. In the collapse of the earth, a high wall made entirely of thunder and fire seemed to form behind Li Tianlan. The high wall was hundreds of meters high, with an amazing momentum that towered into the clouds. The light of thunder and fire intertwined, spread and rose on the wall, turning into a vision that could be seen by most of the city. The speed and power of the dual wind and thunder veins had been exerted to the limit. The dragon's roar spread far away. Thunder and fire surged behind him, and as he waved his fist, they instantly turned into countless dragon-shaped beams of light. From a distance on the high wall made entirely of thunder and fire, dragon-shaped beams of light shot out from behind Li Tianlan and desperately pounced on Jiang Qinyan. In the light, Li Tianlan's broken white clothes loomed in the raging fire, illusory. He was unarmed, but when he waved his hands, there must be dragon-shaped beams of light around him. The majestic power turned into giant dragons intertwined with thunder and fire. The high wall was still blazing and the dragons flew around Li Tianlan, turning into a gorgeous and majestic picture. Jiang Qinyan had no idea that Li Tianlan's counterattack would be so violent. He was not familiar with the dragon fist. But at this moment, among the countless dragon-shaped phantoms, he finally saw the once familiar Li family. The dragons of thunder and fire rushed over and were constantly smashed by Jiang Qinyan. Li Tianlan moved forward. Without any defense, he ignored any injuries. All the fighting intent poured out in the most incisive way in the brandishing of the dragon fist, turning into an instinctive desire to attack and kill. The power kept bursting under the night sky. All of Jiang Qinyan's counterattacks fell on Li Tianlan, but they couldn't make him retreat. His strength was indeed not as good as Jiang Qinyan's. But the dual wind and thunder veins, the long-lost dragon fist, the absolutely focused will, and the optical camouflage on the cloud silk robe allowed him to seize the initiative at the cost of serious injury at the moment when the domain was broken. Now all he needed to do was to attack. In everyone's sight, the earth had collapsed and disappeared, and countless boulders melted in the high wall of thunder and fire as soon as they rushed into the sky. The high wall was moving forward. Li Tianlan was moving forward. Jiang Qinyan was retreating. Countless dragon-shaped thunder and fire rushed out of the high wall in the dragon's roar, surrounded Li Tianlan and pounced on Jiang Qinyan. The huge force distorted the air. In the crazy attack, Jiang Qinyan was completely crushed by Li Tianlan and suffered the opponent's merits in a sorry state. With the battlefield of the two as the center, the whole manor had collapsed and disappeared. Water rose from the ground and quickly gathered. The former manor had been beaten into a lake tens of meters deep. As the two passed, waves of water surged into the sky and turned into an ice wall in front of Li Tianlan. An invisible and immaterial storm surged in front of Jiang Qinyan. Li Tianlan didn't care about anything. He didn't even look at anything. He only attacked. The ice wall, the storm, the rising boulders, the condensed thunder and everything. Li Tianlan chased all the way and any obstacle in front of him was smashed and torn. The whole night was trembling in such a violent attack. This was the momentum of a warrior. It was the momentum of the peak, crazy and insufferably arrogant. No retreat until death. Dragon fist, heaven falls and earth rends. Li Tianlan's fists like heavy hammers hit Jiang Qinyan's arms hard. The moment the violent momentum rose into the sky, the high wall behind Li Tianlan, which was almost a kilometer high and disappeared into the end of the night, shook. The dragon's roar grew louder. It was even a little tragic. The high wall of fire suddenly collapsed with Li Tianlan's fists. Countless rays of light fell fiercely, like a long river falling from the sky or the great wall falling from the sky, almost overturning the whole world. It was earth-shattering. This was truly earth-shattering. The nearly 1,000-meter-high wall burned the night sky and slammed into the lake below, like a mountain crashing into the pond. The water of the whole lake rushed up but was instantly burned out in the raging fire. The deep pit still existed, but the water instantly disappeared in the falling thunder and fire. The lake turned into a desert in the blink of an eye. Only the dragon-shaped light was still flying around Li Tianlan, desperately chasing after Jiang Qinyan. The light in his eyes grew brighter and brighter. Fire and thunder fell completely from the sky. The dazzling light dimmed for a moment. Li Tianlan suddenly took a small step forward. In the twinkling of an eye, countless shadows appeared under the light all over the sky. Catalogue of God of War, Night Walking. Night Walking did not reach Jiang Qinyan's back, but it was close to Jiang Qinyan's body in an instant. This was the closest the two had ever been to each other. Less than a meter away. Li Tianlan's figure suddenly leaped into the air. His body tightened, his bones and muscles contracted at the same time, and his dual thunder veins were fully extended. The dragon's roar in the night sky was unprecedentedly louder, shaking the sky. Li Tianlan stood in the air, connecting heaven and earth. There was no light in his eyes, no anger, no killing intent. There was only tranquility and deathly stillness left in them. In a trance, a nearly transparent light lit up around Li Tianlan. The light suddenly straightened around him and spread to the sky and the earth. The light connected heaven and earth. Wherever it passed, all the thunder and fire were instantly absorbed by the light. Li Tianlan reached out and clenched his fist, seeming to hold the whole transparent light. Jiang Qinyan suddenly looked up. An unconcealable look of horror appeared in his eyes. Soundlessly the ray of light descended. Jiang Qinyan seemed to be completely locked up and there was nowhere to escape. Li Tianlan held the light in his palm and suddenly fell in midair. The light was not in the shape of a dragon. But the overwhelming dragon's roar came to him. Li Tianlan's momentum suddenly rose to the limit. This was the last move of the dragon fist. The fatal punch. Dragon fist. Remove armor at the sight of the dragon. In a trance, Li Tianlan's thoughts went back to Mount Qingyun more than 3 years ago. At that time Mount Qingyun was still open to the public. At that time, Mount Qingyun was still regarded as a fairyland by outsiders. In the somewhat unfamiliar sight he saw the white mist shrouding Qingyun Temple on Qingyun Hill, and similarly saw the old monk in the white mist. He saw the old monk's body slowly dissipating. As he muttered softly, the old monk said something that was exactly the same as his current ultimate technique. The dragon will look up, remove armor at the sight of the dragon. Boom. Late at night in Eastern Europe, Li Tianlan's body fell in midair. The misty white mist instantly rose around him, enveloping the night. Li Tianlan's body became more stretched in an instant. The dual wind and thunder veins reached the perfect state the moment the white mist appeared. His willpower also reached the perfect state. His fighting intent rose to the peak. His strength, speed, willpower, sword intent and fist intent were completely sublimated. At this moment, Li Tianlan was unprecedentedly powerful. He was even more powerful than when he entered the invincible realm in East Island. This was the real strength of the divine list. It was a punch close to the peak of the invincible realm. Li Tianlan waved his fist. His arm smashed down directly. Puff. The change came suddenly. When he was at his most powerful. In his power. When his speed, willpower and sword intent were fully integrated, an inexplicable pain spread through his body in an instant. Li Tianlan's momentum fell from the peak to the bottom in an instant. Nothing unexpected happened. But this punch close to the peak of the invincible realm was restricted by his perfect body in all aspects. That kind of power existed in his body, but it couldn't be condensed. Instead it flew wildly. He couldn't throw this punch. Instead, at the peak he was seriously injured because of the restriction of his body. A mouthful of blood spurted directly from Li Tianlan's mouth. It was extremely scarlet. Spoiler ahead of time? Some brothers said that Zhang Qinyan would not die. If Zhang Qinyan does not die, what's the point of writing so many chapters? Please remember the domain name of this book. 9 Heaven Divine Emperor Mobile Version. Chapter 414. No words could describe how he felt at this moment. The moment of peak, the most perfect state, the strongest attack. At the moment when his killing intent was at its strongest, he completely lost control. A sense of extreme emptiness and loneliness filled his whole body. But the powerful feeling that he could tear the world apart at will still existed. The extreme emptiness and absolute power seemed to be an illusion. Acting on Li Tianlan, all he could feel was a crazy depression. Li Tianlan's eyes turned blood red in an instant. He could clearly feel the power of this punch. See the dragon take off his armor. This was the most comprehensive condensation of a martial artist's physical qualities. His willpower was comparable to the heavenly king heart, and his dual wind and thunder veins, which were far beyond the ordinary wind and thunder veins. The martial arts he had been cultivating in his life and the martial arts he had been exploring were all completely integrated. This punch was almost infinitely close to the power of the peak of the invincible realm, and he would also enter the invincible realm. As long as his realm was stabilized, he would be an expert at the peak of the invincible realm who could reach the top 3 on the divine list. When he was suppressed by the Wang family of Beihai and forced to Eastern Europe by Wang Tianzong, if Li Tianlan entered the invincible realm tonight and stabilized his realm, even if he faced Wang Tianzong he could retreat unscathed. Everything seemed incomparably clear. Li Tianlan was only 1 punch away from the peak of the invincible realm. What a wonderful illusion. But this punch contained all of Li Tianlan's martial arts. The distance of 1 punch was also the distance of the entire Great Tao. It was so close, yet it felt like the end of the world. It was not until this moment that Li Tianlan truly understood that there was nothing wrong with his willpower and that he did not need to sleep all day to nourish his spirit. Traveling tens of thousands of miles for 3 years had not only exhausted him, but it had also tempered his perfect state of mind. His strength, his speed, and his willpower had all become incomparably perfect along with the formation of his martial arts. However, his progress in martial arts was a little slow. Before the invincible realm, there was no realm in his martial arts in the traditional sense. But if he didn't enter the invincible realm, he would still make slow progress. Slow progress, low level of martial arts, problems that were originally not a problem became the most serious problem. There were no flaws in his martial arts. But before the invincible realm, martial arts that had no shortcomings became the biggest shortcoming. If he could break through the invincible realm, none of the current problems would be a problem. But standing on the threshold of the invincible realm, he was perfect in any field, but all kinds of perfection couldn't be integrated at all. He couldn't keep up with the speed of gathering power. When he increased his speed, his strength began to decrease. When his strength and speed were perfect, his willpower couldn't support it. So he raised his fist. When his strength, speed, and willpower reached their peak, he could not throw a punch at all. The so-called perfection did not condense at all. Instead, it began to spread to different parts of his body, to his arms, to his legs. It spread without limit. If he couldn't condense it, how could he talk about the great Tao? In such a situation, even Li Tianlan, with his state of mind, was stunned for a moment. The question was simple. As long as he could enter the invincible realm, when his body was tough enough to withstand all his perfections, these problems would not be a problem. But the biggest problem was that he couldn't condense his perfect strength, speed, and willpower together. How could he break through the invincible realm? There seemed to be a fault in his path. It was also like a dead knot. His body fell to the ground. The transparent light between heaven and earth, which had absorbed countless thunderbolts, was completely shattered in his hands. Zhou Xian, who should have had the fastest reaction speed between life and death, couldn't help but be stunned. Li Tianlan's feet stepped on the ground. The crazy blood red in his eyes disappeared in an instant, and he became calm again. At the moment when the offensive completely collapsed, he raised his hand again. Boom! From a flat land to a lake, from a lake to a desert, the whole manor ruins shook. The dissipated thunderbolts burst out in the most crazy way in an instant. Li Tianlan punched forward. His whole body seemed to be carried up by this punch, and with an unparalleled impact he rushed to Zhou Xian. The distance between the two was extremely close. In just a few meters of space, Li Tianlan's figure suddenly burst out a large number of residual shadows. His whole body, like a cannonball, hit Zhou Xian hard. Dragon Fist, Azure Dragon Cannon. This was the first punch of the 72 styles of Dragon Fist. The beginning of martial arts. It was also the most impactful punch of Dragon Fist. There was no time to dodge or think. At such a close distance, the punch condensed with majestic power hit Zhou Xian's chest. The punch hit the flesh. Li Tianlan was still rushing forward. His arm, under the natural bend, drove the thunderbolts all over the sky and turned into an elbow strike that hit the same place. Li Tianlan's whole body came up and hit Zhou Xian hard. The power of the two sides collided completely. Wind and thunder exploded all over the sky. The flame rose into the sky and turned into a pillar of fire shooting straight into the sky. Countless storms mixed with thunder and lightning turned into a faint blue halo. The halo spread in all directions with Li Tianlan and Zhou Xian as the center. Along the way, the silent power of destruction followed the halo like a shadow. Everywhere the halo went, there was a land of death. Li Tianlan's figure stayed where it was. Zhou Xian's body was completely knocked into the air by the Azure Dragon Cannon. The sound of bones breaking was extremely faint in the sound of the thunderbolts exploding. Thick blood flowed down Zhou Xian's mouth, and his powerful aura began to fluctuate violently, extremely obscure and crazy. Thunderbolts and fire intertwined in the night, and the battlefield was distorted. Through the distorted space, Li Tianlan glanced at Zhou Xian and turned away. His figure flickered in the fire. The already somewhat broken white clothes glowed. In the blink of an eye, there was only a vague figure left in the fire. Stay! Zhou Xian's furious voice swept through the night sky in an instant. The invincible realm expert who had just been suppressed by Li Tianlan was furious for a moment. He was 5th on the holy list this year. The holy list was different from the divine list. At the top of the divine list, every rank was absolutely authoritative. The latter half of the divine list and the entire holy list would always fluctuate obscurely. Wang Tianzong had been number 1 on the divine list for several years and was invincible. No one would doubt it. But the number 1 on the holy list did not have much dominance in the invincible realm. The overall strength of the number 1 on the holy list was not as good as that of the number 15 on the divine list. Such a list might be authoritative at the beginning, but as time passed, every invincible realm expert would make progress. The gap between the top 5 on the holy list was actually very small. Zhou Xian was 5th on the holy list a few years ago. In the past few years, although it was difficult for him to break through the level of martial arts, his own accumulation was getting richer and more subtle in the use of power. In the next ranking of the Divine and Holy list, he even had a chance to hit the Divine list. But in tonight's battle, under the circumstances that he had lost the initiative, he was actually suppressed by a young man who wasn't even 30 years old. He was simply like a dog. All the injuries were suppressed by Zhou Xian in an instant. The entire night sky suddenly became extremely distorted. The domain spread wildly. 30-meter mortal world. 3 inches human world. The strongest domain of the Jiang family of South America would naturally have different changes. Heaven and earth began to collapse and shrink. The mortal world was only 9 meters long. Zhou Xian took a sudden step as if crossing the whole world with one step. This was the extreme speed of the invincible realm expert with all his strength. In the blink of an eye, in a whistling hurricane, Zhou Qianyan's figure came directly to Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan's figure had not disappeared. The crazy killing intent rushed to Li Tianlan from the front and the back at the same time. Lightning surged like a waterfall in the domain of the 30-meter mortal world. The lightning and the domain merged with each other. Xianxia, the patriarch of the Wuxia family, had one less bodyguard. A tall European man with a cold aura left Xianxia's side, turned to the battlefield and attacked with all his strength. As one of the 4 major families in Eastern Europe, the Wuxia family did not have an invincible realm expert. But in Eastern Europe before the turmoil, the Wuxia family, the Violet family, the Morton family, and the Qin family were the pillars that supported the entire Polar Ground Alliance in Eastern Europe. The previous structure of the Polar Ground Alliance was extremely complicated. The 4 supreme families in Eastern Europe, the governments of Eastern Europe and countless wealthy families in Eastern Europe united to form the Polar Ground Alliance, the world's largest and bloated super dark force. But at any time the 4 pillars of the Polar Ground Alliance had an absolutely transcendent position. So although the Wuxia family did not have an invincible realm expert, they never lacked thundershocking realm experts or even half-step invincible realm experts to serve the Wuxia family. Huangxue, you go too. Kill him together with Henry. Xianxia stared at Li Tianlan, who had been completely trapped in the domain on the battlefield, and his voice was cold and decisive. First, the 2 highnesses of Sai City attacked his manor. Then came the revenge of the Snowdance Corps. Everyone in Zhongzhou State seemed to be unscrupulously retaliating against the Jiang family of South America overnight. But this was the motherfucking Reki City. The war started here and it was to trample on the dignity of the Wuxia family. It was impossible for Xianxia to stay out of it. Anyone who provoked Wuxia should be prepared for Wuxia's counterattack. Huangxue. Henry. Before the collapse of the Polar Ground Alliance, both of them were members of the Alliance Parliament. Although the Polar Ground Alliance still existed in name, it was in chaos and could no longer function. The 2 half-step invincible realm experts also returned to the Wuxia family at the same time and worked for Xianxia. The 2 had cooperated in the Polar Ground Alliance for many years and had a tacit understanding. So when Henry helped Zhou Qianyan, Xianxia did not hesitate to send Huangxue over. The figure beside Xianxia moved slightly. The whole battlefield appeared again in an instant. A bolt of ice-cold lightning flashed. 2 thunderbolts spread in the night and eventually merged into the domain of the 30-meter mortal world. The whole domain was no longer the initial misty color. The entire domain was filled with a dark blue color that was filled with the aura of destruction. Li Tianlan's figure became clearer in the dim blue domain. Zhou Qianyan's expression was ferocious and cold, and eventually turned into a completely cold killing intent. In the 30-meter mortal world. In the 30-meter mortal world. Zhou Qianyan punched down with a loud bang. The whole domain twisted like never before. Thunderbolts flew and intertwined in the twisted space. The dim blue light curtain kept expanding and began to explode with a strong aura of destruction. It was not an outbreak. It was a collapse. The shattered domain shrank to a point. Li Tianlan's figure was directly swallowed by the destructive power, completely torn apart and disappeared in an instant. Zhou Qianyan's face suddenly darkened. He saw Li Tianlan's body break into countless pieces. But there was no blood. It was just a shadow that they were trapped in the domain. Shadow again. Shadow. Shadow. Zhou Qianyan felt a headache and irritation for no reason. After the domain broke, there was silence. A biting cold wind blew through the air. Jiang Qinyan suddenly looked back. In his sight, in the position where he and Li Tianlan had just fought, Li Tianlan's figure emerged silently and went away in a flash. The Jiang family of South America is just SOSO. Second brother. It should be too late for you to save your dog now, but I don't think there will be many left. Li Tianlan's figure was getting farther and farther away. Under the night, only his wild laughter kept ringing. Jiang Qinyan suddenly reacted. He subconsciously wanted to find his cell phone, but found that it had been completely destroyed in the battle. The strongest combat force of the Snowdance Corps came to contain him. The other experts went to slaughter the elites of the Jiang family of South America in Reki City. Was that the other party's plan? Jiang Qinyan only felt that the plan was really stupid. The 800 elites of the Jiang family of South America stationed in Reki City were important, but how could they be more important than Li Tianlan? Li Tianlan did contain Jiang Qinyan. But did he really think he could leave at will? Jiang Qinyan grinned and no longer cared about the 800 elites. Without hesitation he jumped up and chased Li Tianlan. At the same time, when the night was about to pass, there was a glimmer of light in the sky. In the camp of the Zhongzhou State garrison, the officers of the Snowdance Corps who came to Eastern Europe from Zhongzhou State had rested, and the camp was quiet. Lieutenant General Qing Huaining, commander of the Arctic Ocean Command, walked in the camp and found Li Zhonghu directly. Both of them were from the Border Control Corps. Although there was a level difference, they were absolutely acquaintances. Qing Huaining knocked on Li Zhonghu's door. The light was on in Li Zhonghu's room. Under the light, the Major General of the Snowdance Corps was already in a military uniform, full of murderous intent. It doesn't seem to be time yet. Qing Huaining glanced at Li Zhonghu and frowned. Let's march at dawn. It's about time. Li Zhonghu said calmly, His Highness's plan leaves us a lot of free time. In order to prevent accidents and contingencies, it's just right to start now. Start? Where did? A voice rang out abruptly. Qin Qingwan, the vice-marshal of the Snowdance Corps, rushed in and asked regardless. He had just discovered that the elites of the Snowdance Corps were mobilizing. And they were all elites from the Border Control Corps. Qin Qingwan's task was to keep an eye on Li Tianlan. Now that Li Tianlan was not there, Qin Qingwan naturally had to keep an eye on Li Tianlan's direct subordinates. A trace of disgust flashed in Qing Huaining's and Li Zhonghu's eyes at the same time. They could understand Qin Qingwan's duty. But the other party's complete disregard for face was really disgusting. Go to Reki City. His Highness's order. Li Zhonghu said flatly. Where is the order? Qin Qingwan narrowed his eyes slightly. Pass. Li Zhonghu said calmly. I can't get in touch with His Highness now. Qin Qingwan shook his head and said, so I can't be sure of this order. Generally, I don't agree with your transfer of troops this time. Report. A loud voice sounded outside the door. Reporting to the division commander, the personnel have been assembled. Dismiss on the spot. Qin Qingwan said without hesitation, this is an order. The guard who came to report was motionless. Li Zhonghu didn't even look at Qin Qingwan and said directly, get ready. We'll march into Wulon State in half an hour. Li Zhonghu. Qin Qingwan stared at Li Zhonghu. Li Zhonghu frowned, waved his hand impolitely and said, get out. Please remember the domain name of this book. Jutian Shenhuang Mobile Version. Chapter 4:15. Pursuit, Fighting and Fleeing. When dawn was about to break, the whole Reki City was in complete chaos. Wulon State was very big. Reki City was outside the halo of the polar sun and the polar night, and there was still a normal alternation of day and night. However, in the time before dawn, the light between heaven and earth was dimmer. Dimness meant vagueness. Vagueness meant chaos. The dazzling light with surging power spread from the north of the city all the way to the center of the city. In the dim environment, a large area of surging and endless light shone out. The battle area was constantly shifting and expanding. The police and the army were all involved. The roaring explosion set off fire and thunder fell from the sky. The shops, supermarkets, and neatly arranged cars on both sides of the road turned into ruins and wreckage in the majestic power and the explosion of gunpowder. More and more experts joined the chase, and a large number of troops began to block the surrounding roads, forming a human wall one after another. The battle was intermittent. Amidst the raging thunder and fire that filled the sky, there would occasionally be a flash of sword light that tore through all the attacks. then more light would descend. The extremely turbulent sword qi and light kept changing directions. Under the leadership of the officers, the army that had sealed off the road built a thick ice wall that almost sealed off all the roads. The space for the illusory but extremely terrifying sword light to move became smaller and smaller. When there was nowhere to go, the sword light could only tear the ice wall that had reached a thickness of tens of meters. The sword light became a little slow when tearing the ice wall. Huge ice cubes flew everywhere, blood stained the ice and countless corpses fell on the street. Although the looming sword light became more and more difficult, it always existed tenaciously. Under the strong intervention of the Rekvia family, all the military forces, police forces and expert teams in Reki City were all operating. The absolute advantage in numbers almost overwhelmed everything. Ice walls appeared in every corner of the battlefield, flashing with blue light and flying over, raging every inch of space. Li Tianlan's actions were getting more and more difficult. He had never underestimated the relationship between the Rekvia family and the Jiang family of South America, nor had he doubted the influence of the Rekvia family in Reki City. But he did not expect that the military of Wulan State would have such an excellent response speed. From the north of the city to the center of the city, in less than 20 minutes, the lineup to kill him had become incomparably luxurious. At this moment, Li Tianlan could see that there were nearly 6 Thundershocking Realm experts, 2 half-step Invincible Realm experts, and 1 Invincible Realm expert chasing after him. The army of Reki City was trying to restrain him at all costs. Even if they had to sacrifice their lives, they didn't want to give Li Tianlan any chance to breathe. Time passed slowly. The losses of Wulan State were getting greater and greater. Li Tianlan was under more and more pressure. Jiang Qinyan completely let go of all distractions and bit Li Tianlan hard. It was not until this moment that he was finally sure that Li Tianlan might not be the strongest Invincible Realm expert in the Dark World, but he was definitely the most difficult to deal with. Shadow Formula, Desperate Dao Chase, Night Travel. Several of the most outstanding body movements in the Dark World were completely integrated into his body. He was swift, unpredictable and impossible to guard against. Jiang Qinyan had a splitting headache. The speed brought by the dual wind and thunder veins to Li Tianlan was not much worse than that of a real Invincible Realm expert. Jiang Qinyan had trapped Li Tianlan in a situation of certain death many times. But every time he tore apart Li Tianlan with his power, it was a vivid and indistinguishable shadow. The shadow could not only die for Li Tianlan, but it could also swap places with the real body at will, which increased Li Tianlan's flexibility several times. In this state, Jiang Qinyan could beat Li Tianlan, but he couldn't King hit him. Jiang Qinyan suppressed his inner impetuosity and had no idea of giving up. Night travel was the top assassination skill, invisible and traceless. The Desperate Dao Chase was very fast and it was unparalleled in both pursuit and evasion. The shadow symbol formula was extremely strange and flexible. The Dragon Fist was all-encompassing. The 24 moves of sword was unparalleled. Li Tianlan wandered between reality and illusion, and the flashing sword intent carried the power to tear the world apart. The dual wind and thunder veins were perfect. Looking at Li Tianlan from a hostile standpoint, everything he had at this time was enough to make people desperate. Jiang Qinyan was not without a way to restrain Li Tianlan. The problem now was that he did not have that condition. Opportunities were always fleeting. Li Tianlan was so fast that Jiang Qinyan could not make a move. What he needed was distance. Within 30 meters, no matter how many trump cards Li Tianlan had, it was useless. After all, he was not really invincible. The ever-changing 30-meter mortal world could completely imprison Li Tianlan. In the blood and fire that filled the whole battlefield, the battle was in a stalemate. Li Tianlan seemed to be unable to get away. But Jiang Qinyan could not rush to the distance he wanted either. The whole battlefield kept moving in the city center, smashing several blocks in a row. At some point, the distance between Jiang Qinyan and Li Tianlan seemed to be narrowed for a moment. But before he could make a move, Li Tianlan had already exchanged places with his own shadow. The sky of Reki City gradually lit up. The whole city was in complete chaos. The dense army that surrounded the battlefield, the broken ice wall, the raging thunder and fire, the piles of corpses and blood. Although the municipal government had issued an emergency notice, many pedestrians were still affected. The fire in the city center kept burning and black smoke rose into the sky. The whole city looked like it had entered a period of war, a scene of doomsday. Orders were issued from Reki City one after another. All the troops around Reki City began to mobilize. At 5:30 in the morning, the Congress of Wulan State officially launched and passed the plan. They were determined to besiege the city. The president of Wulan State personally addressed the world. He said that Reki City was experiencing a disaster, but at the same time he asked the people to continue to have confidence in their government. At the same time, the foreign minister of Wulan State called Xianxia State continuously, asking Xianxia State to explain the destruction of Reki City by Li Tianlan, the commander of the Snowdance Corps. The ambassador of Wulan State to the United Nations applied for a meeting, asking Xianxia State to give an explanation and make compensation. The deep-rooted dominance of the Rekvia family in Wulan State broke out completely in the shortest time and turned into a frenzy. The application for a meeting of the United Nations was still being reviewed. But the whole world knew about the disaster of Reki City. The whole world was watching Reki City. At the same time it was also watching Xianxia State and the Snowdance Corps. Everything happened too fast. It was so fast that people couldn't react at all. By the time everyone received the news, the entire situation had completely tilted in an uncontrollable direction. In the face of Wulan State's questioning, in the face of the implicit or tough hints of other major powers, Xianxia State could only remain silent for the time being. But the Snowdance Corps was no longer silent. Just when the whole world was ready to condemn Xianxia State. In the garrison of Xianxia State, an elite army of 5,000 people of the Snowdance Corps left Daim and marched to Wulan State. The whole world was in an uproar. Star State, Snow Country, France, England, Germany and many other powers in the world called Xianxia State and asked Xianxia State to exercise restraint. Eastern Europe was in chaos. But if possible, no one wanted a real large-scale war to break out in Eastern Europe. If everything was controlled in the conflict of the Dark World, it would be in the best interest of everyone. But the problem was that now the Snowdance Corps seemed to be completely out of control. Xianxia State couldn't contact Li Tianlan at all, not even Qin Qinghuan, the vice-marshal of the Snowdance Corps. At 5:50 in the morning, the president of Wulan State's speech to the world had come to an end. The president of Wulan State officially defined Xianxia State as a hostile country and declared that all the members of the Snowdance Corps were terrorists. Any force or country that provided shelter to the Snowdance Corps would become the enemy of Wulan State. Wulan State would fight against the enemy at all costs to maintain the dignity of the motherland. The influence of the Rekvia family had become a giant hand that covered the sky and the sun, stirring up several countries around Wulan State. For a time, 3 countries in Eastern Europe, including Wulan State, defined Xianxia State as a hostile country and the Snowdance Corps as terrorists at the same time. No one could imagine that Xianxia State's entry into Eastern Europe would be so intense. Similarly, no one could imagine that Li Tianlan's approach would cause such a huge chain reaction. The Snowdance Corps was out of control. Li Tianlan was also completely out of anyone's control. But the situation was also out of control. The question was whether Li Tianlan could still control the situation. At present, Li Tianlan seemed to have no way back. Beihai Province. Mount Dibing. Wang Tianzong listened to Qin Qinghuan's phone call in silence for a long time. Qin Qinghuan was a direct descendant of Wang Qinglei's faction. However, although the internal dangers of the Wang family of Beihai were serious, he did not understand everything before the contradictions were made public. Wang Qinglei did not object to Qin Qinghuan getting the position of vice-marshal of the Snowdance Corps, nor did he give him any hints. In this way, Qin Qinghuan naturally did his duty. What excited him more was Li Tianlan's recklessness. He didn't know Li Tianlan's plan and he wasn't even sure if the young man had a plan. He got off the plane and went straight to Reki City. Unfortunately, he was not strong enough. Now that such a big mess had happened, Qin Qinghuan almost had the urge to cheer. This was an absolutely good opportunity. Perhaps Li Tianlan could not be defined as treason, but with the development of the situation, Xianxia State was under more and more pressure. If the Wang family of Beihai and Kunlun City joined forces, it was entirely possible to force Xianxia State to give up Li Tianlan. At that time, it would be shown that Li Tianlan was a traitor of Xianxia State. Not only would the pressure of Xianxia State disappear, but as the vice-marshal of the Snowdance Corps for the stability of the Snowdance Corps, Qin Qingwan would be the best candidate to serve as the commander of the Snowdance Corps. So on the phone, facing Wang Tianzong, whom he usually respected and estranged, Qin Qingwan's tone had been a little excited. Your Majesty, this is an opportunity. Why don't we join forces with Kunlun City to push it? No hurry. After a long silence, Wang Tianzong slowly said, It's not over yet. Don't rush to conclusions. Wait and see. Qin Qingwan was stunned. Wang Tianzong silently hung up the phone. However, before the phone was hung up, Wang Tianzong's words shocked Qin Qingwan. I will arrive in Eastern Europe before tonight. At 6 o'clock in the morning, all the troops of Reki City had been completely assembled. The troops of all the nearby cities were mobilized. Reki City was completely blocked and besieged. Li Tianlan tried his best to move the battlefield, and his actions became more and more difficult. The pursuit continued. Jiang Qianyan was less than 40 meters away from Li Tianlan. The battlefield moved from the north of the city to the city center, nearly 30 kilometers away. The fight that made everyone tremble with fear was about to end. Ahead, in the Holy Thunder Memorial Square of Reki City. For the entire Wulan state, this was a sacred place for heroes. Jiang Qianyan suddenly felt that this square was really good. Although the square was destined to be ruined in this battle, Li Tianlan deserved the honor of this place. Close. More than a dozen monuments tens of meters high on the square looked extremely majestic and solemn in the dawn sky. The morning sun cut through the sky. The morning sun shone from the east. Jiang Qianyan subconsciously narrowed his eyes. His vision blurred for a moment. The next second, Li Tianlan's bloody figure suddenly disappeared in the sunlight. Jiang Qianyan was not in a hurry and just sneered. Now the so-called stealth body movement and optical camouflage were meaningless. Because Eastern Europe was too cold. The square surrounded by tens of thousands of troops was even colder. An ice wall covering the entire square was constantly spreading and taking shape. The ice wall condensed by tens of thousands of people was almost a glacier. It was not easy for Gu Qianchuan or even the experts at the bottom of the divine list to break through such a scale. No matter how sharply Tianlan's sword energy was, what could he do? The troops began to gather toward the center of the square from all directions. The condensed glacier blocked the sunlight and slowly squeezed over. Jiang Qianyan's figure stepped into the memorial forest of monuments in the square. There were wisps of light coming out of him and sweeping forward. The light completely enveloped Jiang Qianyan. The blood on his body disappeared from everyone's sight. The light completely covered him. Jiang Qianyan moved slowly like a leisurely walking sun. The light kept surging. 30-meter mortal world, glorious holy hall. In an instant, all the light centered on Jiang Qianyan. It spread out and covered the entire square. In the strongest field of the Jiang family of South America, all optical camouflage was meaningless. Jiang Qianyan saw Li Tianlan. All the experts who followed him also saw Li Tianlan. He stood on the tallest monument in the monument forest, holding a long sword. The sword intent on the blade of falling stars whistled. The moment his figure appeared in the domain, the silver light suddenly rose into the sky. The long sword stabbed straight. The silver light burst out. The sword intent was completely restrained and it looked very ordinary. But as the sword intent of nothingness passed, everything became extremely real in an instant. The silver sword edge was still moving forward. Li Tianlan took a step forward. The light around him changed from real to nothingness, and from nothingness to falsehood. But the illusory sword intent appeared in everyone's mind with incomparable realism. The sword seemed to pierce the space. The sword light lit up. The sword energy had been overwhelming and surging down. Sea-breaking move. The sword energy enveloped all the experts, including Jiang Qianyan. Blood sputtered. Jiang Qianyan was calm. When the sword energy was about to sweep his body, he was calm and even had the mood to smile. 30-meter mortal world. So close yet worlds apart. The 30-meter mortal world was fast. But this foot-apart art was even faster. The whole space was obviously distorted. Jiang Qianyan's figure retreated like a cannonball. In the blink of an eye, his figure almost disappeared from Li Tianlan's sight. Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows sharply, and the blade of falling stars moved forward again. He seemed to want to chase. Why can't you see me? A peaceful voice with a vicious smile suddenly sounded behind Li Tianlan. Bang! Jiang Qinyan, who seemed to have retreated far away, appeared directly behind Li Tianlan and punched him hard in the back of the heart. Thick blood spurted out of his mouth. However, this powerful and heavy punch did not send him flying. All the power rushed into his body, broke out, and became a serious injury. It became an internal injury. Jiang Qinyan laughed. Li Tianlan had the shadow formula. He had the desperate chase. He had the dark night walking. They were all the top body techniques in the dark world. But not all the top body techniques in the dark world belonged to the Li family. 30-meter mortal world was the strongest unique skill of the Jiang family of South America. In other words, the Jiang family of South America only had this unique skill. But the endless changes in it were equally broad and profound. The 3-inch world belonged to the body technique. A short distance between worlds also belonged to the body technique. Li Tianlan's body bent down subconsciously. The vast and spreading domain gathered quickly with crazy killing intent. 30-meter mortal world, Sanluo Hell. The domain closed. The sound of wind could be heard from every corner of the domain. Masses of air condensed in the domain one after another, eventually turning into swords and sabers. The swords and sabers were all aimed at Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan, in a seriously injured state, took the Sanluo Hell head-on. It was not easy to find a whole body, not to mention whether he could survive or not. Jiang Qinyan punched down again. Li Tianlan's figure disappeared in an instant. A shadow broke in front of Jiang Qinyan. Li Tianlan's figure moved sideways in 2 steps, changed his position and faced Jiang Qinyan. The distance between the two was no more than 5 meters, and they stood on the same monument. Go in peace. Jiang Qinyan sneered and clenched his fist. The swords and sabers that filled every corner of the domain shook at the same time, like a large torrent, rushing toward Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan held falling stars with both hands. He raised the sword to his eyebrows. This move was not a unique skill. Only sword intent. The purest sword intent surged violently on the blade of falling stars, rushing toward the dense swords and sabers that occupied his field of vision. The swords and sabers perished in the sword intent. However, more and more swords and sabers were rushing over endlessly. The domain of the 30-meter mortal world grew thicker and thicker. It was unbreakable. Li Tianlan's sword intent kept flying in the domain, but it was always a step behind. No skill could make up for this step. This was the gap between the invincible realm on the holy list and the invincible realm. Naked, obvious, close but out of reach. Only a step behind, but the outcome was clear. Li Tianlan's sword intent grew weaker and weaker. In the domain, the mighty swords and sabers turned into a growing torrent, pressing toward Li Tianlan's body. Jiang Qinyan, who was also trying his best to maintain the domain, narrowed his eyes and was about to continue. Boom! The whole monument, which was tens of meters high and nearly 10 meters wide, shook with a bang. A heat wave as violent as magma rose from under his feet, and the flames were monstrous. The army in the distance was still slowly gathering toward the square. But in a few unknown corners of the square, there was sword light and wind and clouds surging. It was like a plan agreed in advance. It was also like a temporary rescue. The sword light surged and burst out. The killing intent that had been lying in ambush here for a long time burst out at Jiang Qinyan's most relaxed moment. Jiang Qinyan lowered his head. At this moment he finally understood why Li Tianlan rushed in this direction at the risk of aggravating his injury not long ago. He looked over the tall monument and saw a skinny old man who was already a little bald. The old man appeared silently under the monument and held a corner of the monument in his palm. The raging flames surged up like a surging wave. The whole stone monument instantly turned red and even a little transparent. The old man's arm shook violently. In the boundless heat wave, the whole monument kept shaking. The skinny old man seemed to have pulled the whole monument, which was tens of meters high, out of the ground with one hand, uprooting mountains and rivers. About Qin Qingwan, it seems to have been said that he was a woman. I was going to write that he was a woman at first, but then I thought how bad it was to be a woman. So I did an operation on him. He became a man. It's officially confirmed that Qin Qingwan's operation was successful. He is a man. Genius. 1 second to remember this website. Mobile version.